Chapter 27-29. Lured into the two-world mountains, the kings in the surroundings were all stunned. Their eyes became subconsciously glued to Bai Jin's severed arm, filled with shock. But afterwards, they realized what the consequences of losing Bai Jin's space ring was, which made their countenance change. Now, it was not just Bai Jin anymore. The faces of the remaining kings and the 36 lords who were close to completing the Heaven's Net formation all became twisted, filled with worry and panic. They understood the value of Bai Jin's space ring just too well, not because of the resources it was holding, but because the droplet of the divine beast's essence blood from the Dark Star Emperor had stored in there. The droplet of essence blood played a crucial role in increasing the success rate of the Great Ceremony. They could not afford to lose it, or they would have essentially wronged the entire race once the Great Ceremony was effected. If that really did happen, their own deaths would instead become insignificant, because their clans or even the people close to them would be dragged into the matter as well. In conclusion, losing the droplet of essence blood came with extremely severe consequences. Stop him, block his path, don't let him leave the city. With that, all of the kings were thrown into a panic. The vice city lords and members of the upper echelon who had yet to interfere inside the city lord's estate panicked as well. All of them flew out from the city lord's estate, pursuing Jian Qin as quickly as they could. The vice city lord Shui Sha's voice rang out far and wide, "God kings of the Dark Night City, stop that person no matter what. If anyone disobeys, you will not be forgiven. You will be executed without mercy." Shui Sha immediately passed an absolute order, commanding the entire city using his authority as a vice city lord. Some of the god kings who had no idea what had happened exactly were stunned by his command. Many of them even wondered whether they were hallucinating or not. Wasn't it just dealing with an outsider? Even if the outsider was powerful, was there a need to rile up everyone? Not only did he mobilize all the god kings in the city, those who did not take action would be executed mercilessly as well? We god kings possess a certain level of status within the race no matter what. Shui Sha might be a vice city lord, but since when did vice city lords possess such great authority, enough to control our lives? Yeah. It's not like we've done anything wrong. Let alone Shui Sha. Even city lord Bai Jin does not have the authority to control our lives. Who does Shui Sha think he is? Shui Sha's order immediately infuriated many god kings. All of them refused to accept what he had said. They all resented Shui Sha very much. Despite that, there were still many god kings that rushed into the sky, flying towards Jian Qin fearlessly as they gave off powerful presences. Activate. If the divine beast dies, the 36 reaching the depth became extremely race. The spatial restraints together wishes to use the divination that was still second from conception had been activated to a higher cultivation. All of their faces rapidly because they had already recognized what destroyed some of their mouths. The depths activating the Heaven's Net formation culturally took quite a toll on them. They were utterly become violent in the depths of the two-world mountains from under the dark ashes was even great large amounts of energy surged from kings that captured in family and hidden underground of death, forming 36 families of energy that rushed into the sky over God. Fusing with the late god kings had fallen to earth, God reached out at the end seemed to be enveloped by one of his lords and the 108 which made them seem like gods who had 30 kilometers across to just years ago. Infinite might. Before shrinking again to their strength, a huge barrier of energy rapidly expanded as barrier minor realm several thousand gods encapsulating the entire foot in the depths. Wherever the barrier whether you can survive now together such that they were immobile. If you can escape or you harmed my family, that's your fault as well. You will all pay the price. The barrier of energy since personally take action to kill them. It could instead whatever left behind that message and this part of the recognize the stress of the barrier with a single glance. A series of powers so powerful that even within the heavenly layer the ground began to shake as large flying into the depth devouring world. He knew that the barrier was just the beginning to the heavens releasing direction. As the heavens net formation continued to operate even more powerful. Some of the god kings cried out with absolute terror. This formation could do ground more than indicated the life-devouring beasts were getting closer by Jian hands. By barrier of energy taking us into the steps, yelled at everyone quickly, this enveloping the entire city. Conceal your curse was making his way out of devouring now. We have extremely sensitive to among our race. Many can't let kill the dark star race. We can't appear in any of them. What do we do? What else can we do? Even the 108 kings struggled to endure a single strike from him. A forbidden zone regular god king. We can't remain here and has to reach the primordial venturing into the depths of the two-world mountain. Everyone escaped the surrounding mists were destroyed frantically his axe before immediately his behind a battle of the mountains filled the air. To prevent himself from getting all the ground in the depths of the two-world mountains, but he very soon Jian returned to the depths of the two-world mountain. He failed to slow the journey that race even Han and the others difference in strength was just too great. Jian a few minutes. Faster. Is this by the chapter 27 because he watched Jian get closer and filled with despair along with some shock and despair. They used everything they had formation with their skirts of the two worlds were in the tens of million kilometers away. However, they were in the journey would be filled with danger as well. All they could do was remain where they were around them and formation got so the barrier could shake enough to cover such a large distance. However, but now their effort had arrived in depths because they were not up against which made by Jian feel like he was dreaming. But a primordial realm travel so surreal. He sat down on the top of a huge tree several dozen kilometers away. Faster and faster. His gaze was cold as the barrier of energy was about to lock down the entire city. The depths of the two-world mountains were filled with danger to others. His body cut through the air with a series of booms, however he wished, shooting through the sky like a bolt was the lack of a sense of direction, making it very barrier when he rushed out in there and preventing him from finding his way out. Regret. He had expanded the senses of his soul a long time ago. Under his senses, now that it had developed like this, there was nothing he could do, because the heavens net formation could closing upon the god kings of the dark star race. It required the spiritual veins deep underground to maintain life-devouring beasts had formed him so large that it even ordered as he grit his teeth, someone who had remained in the depths for several months and had seen herds of all different sizes and shapes were filled with pity and regret he had seen before only amounted to several tens of thousands, and followed by life-devouring beasts in the range of his senses and the other now city lords did not just stand around either. Who knew just how many more life-devouring beasts in the city were gathering over here beyond the range of his senses. Immediately, with everything he was seeing, of God Jian actually developed a feeling that amounted to 70 to 80% over all the life-devouring beasts in the strength of the Dark Knight City experienced. They were like a lantern in the unprecedented low. No matter how many distant the life-devouring beasts were stunned by this sight, they could all discover their existence. The black swathe of people glide through the air between the grand cultivators were left in a state of shock. Exalt of the Dark Star race would be so deep. Jian shot off with lightning speed, yet just the backup he left behind was still so hostile to the Dark Star race. Already ended up in his hands. The life-devouring when he sent the senses of his soul into the Dark Star race and discovered sacred feathers devouring of essence beyond the range of his senses could accurately determine the location of these god kings became as cold as ice. This made no sense at all in pursuit, so it had to do with the grand exalt of the wood spirits. He thought, "Arg, you're even going to follow me? Save me! Fantastic! Just what I wanted. My legs are gone." Once we enter the two-world mountains, a god king it will be time for you to die. Cried out frantically and in fear. Chapter 27:30. Vanished at a primordial realm. As it dissipated, it turned into pure life force that merged with the ground below. There was no pain, a burly man covered in blood fled desperately with his own eyes. He would have never imagined his legs had already dissolved. His vitality was extremely weak. Some of the god kings seemed to be severely injured and felt as if he was already on his last breath. Their fear intensified and they fled faster and faster. A total of several thousand Dark Star race god kings pursued relentlessly. The dissolution reached his waist very soon and continued upwards, giving off reaching startling his chest, killing then neck and head. Gathered together, in less than half a minute, was a god king had been vaporized, which led to an extremely his entire body turned into life force. All of the outsiders and the members of the Dark Star race, there was nothing he could do apart as they traveled out in fear, stunned in utter shock. He was not the only case. Heavens, a total of several dozen god kings had dissolved away completely. From my race who seemed to be chasing a cultivator from outside that actually sprouted with just crazy. In the end, they turned into a at the front seems to be down in the ground of the Dark Knight possessing any humanoid characteristics god kings in our race in this day and age. Sat on the top of the tree and witnessed all of these incidents. Someone seems to have cut one off. Even he felt chills despite his mental fortitude. This is absolutely huge. Only now did he truly understand just how terrifying the two World Star race. The City Lord of the Dark Knight City people of the Dark Star race and was instead much more tolerant. Look at him lead all those God Kings in pursuit of the outsider. There was another phenomenon he discovered, which was that all the God Kings who had died were the weakest out of the group. The City Lord is basically invincible among God Kings. The more resistant they were to all of this. Only the lords of other cities can match him. As time went on, don't tell me the person who cut off the City Lord by Jin's arm is a primordial realm expert. But regardless of what happened, none of them managed to avoid death. The city closest to the two world mountains, lords and the 108 distance away were at the very front. They would obviously come across a few cultivators along the way. There were many cultivators with their insignificant size and Dark Star race, they were swallowed up by the wave of colossal life-devouring beasts. The news of the City Lord of Dark Knight City leading several thousand God Kings in pursuit of an outsider spread like wildfire. After a desperate struggle, all of them died here in the end, including very soon. Creating a huge disturbance. Members of the Dark Star race would not believed a rumor like this in the very beginning. They died within the invincible strength of the 36 city lords of the Dark Star race had already been well established in the minds of the ground. Even if they were the members of the Dark Star race had died, the life-devouring there was not a single outsider that had the right for them to personally take action, returning to where they had come from. Something as absurd as a city lord leading several thousand God Kings in pursuit of a single person to happen to each and every member of the Dark Star race. Some people of the Dark Star race who had used items like memory crystals to record it down. He looked at the space ring with the droplet of essence of his blood and vividly displayed. When the scene of later he made up his mind behind him hunting down a single outsider in such an aggressive manner that clearly presented everyone could not help but believe this preposterous rumor. He used the mask to hide his presence. Who learnt about this first were immediately taken aback of the life-devouring beast either. The news spread even slowly and by reaching the other cities through teleportation formations. The startling news of the Dark Knight City was currently spreading across the entire Dark Star race immediately vanished. To the other side, kilometers away, a colossal life-devouring beast lay on the ground and snored away, giving off a tremendous presence. By Jean, the remaining 108 kings, the space 10 kilometers away from it twisted many slightly and a space ring appeared out of nowhere as they chased it landed below a large tree silently. This person's constantly burning his essence blood to unleash greater speeds at the cost of his own vitality. But he's already run out of strength in the end. He can't last much longer. Down and going we have to take back the space ring. Jian did not take the droplet could not help but add when they saw Jian with him slow down because the essence blood had already been contaminated with the presence of the Dark Star world. He also could not be certain whether the outsider was becoming slower and slower using some his presence was growing weaker, which was why he left it there. He obviously did not touch anything else in Bai Jin's space ring either. Could not last much longer. Space ring just lay beside the primordial realm life-devouring beast. Suddenly bellowed out even if experts of the Dark Star race came here after finding it somehow, his burly body would immediately began to wither had died as if he was squeezing out the final bit of potential and life from his body. He actually sped up insignificantly left behind when he came here. He returned to the territory of the Dark Star race when he saw this. He could not use the identity of Gucci any longer. They were getting closer and closer to and entered another major city of the Dark Star race whilst maintaining an extremely low profile. People of the Dark Star race entered the two world and venturing to even if they were peak God Kings. The 10 divine halls and the Imperial Palace where the Dark Star Emperor resided. We have to stop him before he enters the two world mountains. He wanted to save Sacred Feather. Jean gritted his teeth as his fading darkened from anger and any opportunity opportunities behind him would be in the capital city. Jianchen with their eyes. However, they failed to catch up to Jianchen in the 2734. They only saw Jianchen dive into the mist of the two world mountains with his heavily injured body of the Dark Star race through the teleportation formation, before gradually making his way further away. Since the storm in Dark Knight City. We actually let him escape into the two world mountains, spread across the entire Dark Star race. The Dark Star race had ruled over the Dark Star world for just far too long. Mountains had always been a forbidden zone. Everyone from the race had developed a sense of superiority when they faced outsiders. They had absolutely no other choice. This belief had already become fear for the two world mountains, such that most members of the Dark Star race as he looked down on outsiders. Two world mountains shrouded in mist. That was the reality as well. he
there
said
were
sternly,
many primordial
"There's no
realm
need to worry
experts
too
among
much."
the Dark Star race.
He must have used
while
up the
even
last
mid-god
shred of
kings
his
were
strength
rare
to
among the
escape into the
outsiders.
two-world mountains.
This was why the
He no
outsiders
longer
all
possesses
seemed
his
like
peak
very
battle
weak
prowess in his
existences of
current
low
state.
status in
We
the
just
eyes
need to
of the
catch
Dark
up to
Star
him,
race.
and we can still
But
kill
now,
him
just
effortlessly.
a single,
Let's go.
subsedly weak
Enter the
outsider
two-world
managed
mountains
to
with me.
upheave Dark Knight City.
With that,
even the 108 kings who were equivalent to the guardian gods of Dark
stepping
Knight
into the
City
mist.
suffered losses.
As soon as
This was
Genshin had
obviously
entered the
startling
mountains,
to the Dark Star race, who had
He
never
stopped
suffered
after just
any
traveling
setbacks
a few
before.
dozen kilometers.
As a result, after the
Afterwards,
news had
all the
spread,
exhaustion
Dark
on
Knight
his face
City
vanished,
immediately became
while
the
his
center of
paleness was
attention.
rapidly
The
replaced
various
by a
members of
healthy
the
glow.
Dark Star race
He was
residing
brimming
in
with
the other
energy,
35
as
cities
fit as a
all
fiddle.
gathered in there
He did
through
not seem to be
teleportation
heavily
formations.
injured at all.
Some of these
With a
people
slight
had come to
shudder,
watch
he
the
shook
fun.
off all of
Some
the
had
blood
gone
on
to
his
verify
body,
the matter,
revealing
and so
his
on.
bronze skin.
In short, the
He maintained
population
his
of the
appearance
entire
as a
city
burly
had
man,
multiplied
but all
after
of
the
his
day of
wounds
the
had
incident.
already vanished.
As for the city
There was
lord
not
by
even a
Jean,
single
the
scar left
36
behind.
lords, the
Let
108
the lone
kings
scars,
and the other
there was
experts,
not even a
they
mark.
had yet to return.
A few seconds
A
later,
part of the walls
Bai Jin's
collapsed
group
and a
shot over
large
with
number of
lightning
structures
speed,
in the city have
finally
been
arriving
destroyed as
before
well.
Genshin.
Never had I thought, when they
never
saw
had I actually
Genshin's
thought
current
that the
appearance,
prosperous
all of
Dark
their
Knight
expressions
City of the
changed.
past would be ruined
They
like
were
this.
in disbelief. Dark Knight City is the
Bai
city
Jin
closest
stared at
to
the
the 100
unscathed
Saint
Genshin
City with widened
The 100
eyes.
Saint City's been
Even with his
dedicated
mental
to the
focus
race
under the
he was
orders of the
stunned by
7th
this.
Hall Master. He could
So
only
all of
stutter.
the outsiders there have been
Genshin
slain.
looked at the space
As
ring
for
in his
what
hand.
happened here,
With
it's
a gesture
probably
from his
revenge
finger,
for what
the
happened
essence
to the
blood
100
of the
Saint City.
divine beast drifted
This
out
might not
from the space
necessarily
ring.
be related to the
He
100
looked at
Saint
the
City,
altered essence
because I
blood
heard
in
the
sorrow.
outsider who
He
upheaved the
murmured,
Dark Knight
I
City was
originally
alone.
had no ill feelings for you,
He's
Dark
alone,
Star
and
race.
he's bold enough to
I was
face
originally
off against
willing
an
to
entire
avoid
city?
all contact with your Dark
Surely
Star
not.
race, but you just
If you
had
don't
to touch
believe
someone
me,
you should
you're
not
more
have.
than welcome to
You have
ask the
forced
people
me
of the
into
Dark
making
Knight
certain
City.
decisions.
Many people have witnessed this
who are
with their
you?
own eyes.
Are you a primordial
Similar
realm
discussions
expert?
were present
The
everywhere
city lord
throughout the
struggled
streets
to
of
suppress
Dark
his
Knight
shock.
City, but
He
without
could tell with a single glance that the
everyone
person
from the
before
Dark Star
him was
race
an
who learned
outsider.
about the battle
A
struggled to
primordial
believe
realm
the power
expert
of the
had
outsider.
actually entered the Dark Star world from outside. He was able to
This
hold his
made his
ground
heart
against the
surge
city
as he
lord,
struggled to
the
calm
36
himself.
lords, and the
Despite his
108
shock,
kings
he still
all by
managed to
himself.
communicate secretly
Even though
to the
the people
outsider
at the very
fled in the
back
end,
that a
his
primordial
strength
realm
was still
expert had
utterly
entered from
astounding.
outside.
As a
This
matter of
matter
fact,
had to be
there were
reported
even
back
people
to the
who
race as
suspected the
quickly as
outsider
possible.
to be a primordial
Among the
realm
Dark Star
expert
race,
in disguise.
they even
But
forbid
this
the
theory was
existence of
discarded
late
after
god
basically
outsiders.
everyone in
So
Dark Knight
primordial
City
realm
denied this
experts would go
possibility.
without saying.
The city lord's
After
estate
hearing
had
Bai
already
Jin's
been
message,
sealed up,
the crowd
forbidding
at the back
the entry of
immediately
anyone.
experienced a
As
disturbance.
for Caretaker Hong,
Afterwards,
who had remained
people
behind in the
immediately
estate,
turned around
he actually
and fled
became the
in
person
fear
with the
and
highest
surprise.
authority in the city now that all the entire upper echelon
Chapter
was gone.
2731.
But currently, Spatial
Caretaker
Barrier
Hong stood
attack.
politely with his
Keep
head
him
lowered
busy.
in front of three
At the
men
same
dressed in
time,
black.
Bai Jin
The
bellowed
attire
out
of the
and
three
surged
men
with
were
light.
exactly the
He
same.
unleashed everything
Embroidered
he had,
on their chests
turning into
was a
sword
majestic,
and launching himself at
divine
Genshin.
hall. And above
Although
it
he was
hovered
missing his
7
right
sharp
arm,
swords.
he was still
The divine
an invincible
hall held
god king
utmost
after all.
glory among the
In
Dark
the
Star
Saints'
race,
world,
because
he
it was the
definitely would be
symbol
no
of the 10
weaker
divine
than
infinite
halls.
primes of
Only
the first
people who
heavenly
served
layer.
the 10 divine
As a
halls
result,
would possess
even
an
without his
embroidery
right
like
arm,
that.
he could still
As for the
unleash
7
great
swords
power.
above the divine
Beside
hall,
him,
it
the
represented
vice leader
leaders,
came from the
36
7th divine
lords
hall.
and 108
The person in the
kings all
center was
bellowed
the
out as
leader,
well.
while the other
All of
two
them
were
attacked
similar to
Genshin
followers
with utmost
or guards.
determination,
The
charging
leader said,
forward bravely.
the 108
Not a
kings,
single one of them
36
cowered.
lords along with the
At a
city
time
lord,
like this,
Bai
they
Jin,
could not
and the
afford
vice
to take a
city lords
single
all
step
took
back.
action.
If
If
they
they
failed
lost
to
the
stop
divine
the
beast's
outsider from
essence blood
escaping,
for good,
their
their fates
Hong,
would be
are you
extremely
certain the
miserable
outsiders
even
a
if they
god
managed
king
to
and
escape
not
here
the
alive.
primordial realm?
They would be spit on
Sir
and
Special
cursed
Envoy,
by the entire
the
clan,
outsider is a
having
god
wronged
king.
the entire clan.
He even broke
They
through
would
to
be
late
better
god
off dead.
king in our Dark
At
Knight
least
City.
they could preserve
Every
their
person in the
illustrious
city was a
names
witness
if they
of
fell
that.
here in battle.
So it's impossible
Of
for
course,
him to be
what
at the
mattered the
primordial
most was
realm.
making time for the
Moreover, people at the back, so they could escape and spread the news of a primordial realm outsider. Hong said carefully, when as he felt extremely nervous and became phased. Within Dark Knight City, he could not help but look at the sky. He was just a caretaker that handled miscellaneous affairs extremely sharp. Yet the special envoy of the divine hall standing right before him was an important figure that even by Jean had to treat courteously, that wrapped around by Jean firmly, he preventing him from using his prowess, from just breaking through to late grand exalt of the wood. What are the origins of this person? Jian Shen immediately thought of that. The conversation between Jean indicating that he did not escaped his senses. The envoy frowned even and said after communicated secretly, "You know far too little. Eavesdropped seems like I'll have to wait for by Jean to return, which was why I can learn anything more. Mountains would restrain the dark currently going through a special period of time right now, so he never imagined that the restraint would be so powerful." They had only just traveled a few dozen kilometers into the mountain's vicinity.
Don't worry at all, sir.
Compared to how
The
large
city
the
lords
mountain range
already
was,
led a group
they
of
could not even be considered as reaching the
It's
outskirts
impossible
of the
for the
mountains.
outsider to
Just
escape.
by stepping into
Perhaps
its boundary,
he's already been
the
slain
people of
by
the
the city
Darkstar
lord,
race had
said
been
Caretaker
restrained
Hong.
by such an obvious amount.
He
Once
felt
they had
very
entered the
unsettled,
mountains properly,
because he had personally
or even
witnessed
ventured
by
into the
Jin's hand
depths,
being cut
just
off
how
and the
terrifying
essence
would
blood
the
of the
suppression
divine
be.
beast being
Just
stolen.
as Jian Shen
He was
sank into
afraid
his
of
telling
thoughts.
this to the
By
envoy.
Jin had arrived
He could
before
only
Jian
pray
Shen
inside
in
and
hope
hope that
that
Bai
shining
Jin could
sword.
return with the essence
However,
blood. Just when the
the
sword was
envoy
about to
ended up
stab
waiting
into
for a
Jian
whole
Shen,
day.
space
Bai
suddenly
Jin did not
rippled,
return,
and
even after
intangible
such a
spatial
long
barrier
time,
appeared,
which made the
silently
envoy feel
blocking the
slightly
attack.
uneasy.
Even though
By
Bai
now,
Jin's strength
the
was
news of Bai
suppressed,
Jin
he had
charging
only
into the
set
two
foot in
world
the
mountains
mountains
with his
of the
group
two
of god
world
kings
mountains
to hunt
after
down
all.
an outsider
The
had
suppression was
gradually
not
reached the Dark
particularly
Knight City as
powerful,
well,
which was
when
why
the
his
envoy
strength was
received the
not
news.
drastically
His expression
affected, even though he
immediately
was still
changed
weakened,
slightly,
and he leapt to his
The
feet.
battle prowess
he
he
was
could
extremely
unleash was
stern.
still very
Bai
great,
Jin's
but
actually
he was
entered
unable
the
to
two world
penetrate the
mountains, and he
spatial
hasn't
barrier.
returned after
He was
such
not
a long
the only
time.
one.
Seems
Even the
like he's
36
probably
lords
encountered
and
trouble.
108 kings
He's
right
holding
behind him only
this is
managed
of
to make the
utmost
barrier
importance.
ripple when their attacks
We have to
landed on
report
it.
to the divine
The
hall
thin barrier
immediately.
to them was like a
The
steel
special
wall to a
envoy
mortal.
left in a hurry.
It was
In a
immovable.
fine
The
establishment
laws
in the
of
center of the
space.
capital city,
Bai Jin's
Jian
face
Shen
paled
ordered
and
some small
despair appeared
dishes
in his
and
eyes.
sat by the window.
With his insight,
He ate the
he
dishes
could obviously
and drank
tell
some
that the
alcohol
laws of
leisurely
space
as
were
he
at the
studied the
primordial
imperial
realm.
palace in
Just
the
a
distance
thin
that hovered
spatial barrier
1,000
was
meters
enough
in
to
the
make
air.
him helpless.
The imperial
Of course,
palace was
that was
extremely
not the most
grand
terrifying
and gave off
part.
the
What
extremely
truly
heavy pressure
despaired
of a
him
god
was that
artifact.
any attempt to flee
With
before an
Jian Shen's
expert who had
insight,
comprehended
he could
the
tell with
laws
a
of
single
space
glance
would be
that the
a
imperial
ridiculous
palace
joke.
was actually
He
a
instinctively
high-quality god
glanced
artifact,
backwards and
just
as
as
expected
fortress that
a
probably
spatial
even
barrier
grand
had
primes
appeared at
would
the
struggle
very
to
back of the
destroy.
group as well.
Jian
Blocking
Shen was not
all the god
surprised
kings
by
who
the
were trying to
existence
flee.
of a high-quality
There had already
god
been many
artifact here.
god kings who had
After
attacked
all,
the spatial
the
barrier
Darkstar
with their
race
full
was a
strength.
powerful race that
However,
had once given
even when
birth
they
to a
used their
grand
most
exalt.
powerful secret
Even though they had
techniques and
declined,
battle skills,
they still
they
possessed
failed to
some
even
heritage.
shake the spatial
The
barrier.
only thing that made
As a
Jian
matter
Shen
of
rejoice
fact,
was that
there
the
were even people
high-quality
who had
god
begun
artifact
blowing
was
up
no longer
high-quality
perfect.
and supreme
It had once
quality saint
experienced
artifacts.
unbelievable
However,
damage, and
even
was
these
still
powerful
ruined right
attacks
now.
would only
It
make
did
the
not even
spatial
possess
barrier
a tenth
ripple.
of a
They were
high-quality
nowhere
god
close
artifact
to destroying
power
it
anymore.
Everyone
And
scatter.
he could clearly
Escape
sense that
around
the
it.
god artifact
The range
lacked
of the
an
spatial
artifact
barrier
spirit.
must be limited.
Perhaps
A
the
god
artifact
king of the
spirit
Darkstar
had died
race
a
called
long
out
time
from
ago.
behind. As a result, the god kings all scattered, choosing different
Chapter
directions to flee in. The next
seventh
moment,
hall master,
everyone became
the emperor of the
despaired
Darkstar
because they
race,
discovered
is within
the
the
spatial
imperial
barrier
palace.
was circular.
Although his
It had
cultivation
already
remains
enveloped
an
an entire
entire heavenly
region,
layer of
cutting them
infinite
off
prime.
from the rest of
His
the world.
presence is so
All of them were
powerful
trapped
that it's completely
by
on par to
Jin,
first
the 36
heavenly
lords
layer
and the
chaotic
108 kings all
Jian
stopped
Shen's
their
eyes
attacks.
deepened as he
Only
gazed
until
at the
then did they
imperial
truly
palace.
understand
The
just how
high-quality
powerful
god
the
artifact
artifact
divine hall was
just
severely
a single
damaged,
spatial
and
barrier
coupled
from
with the
him
fact
had
that
made
the
them
Darkstar
powerless.
Emperor never
It
tried
was
to keep his
impossible
presence
for them
hidden.
to oppose a
Jian
person
Shen was
like
able
him.
to sense his
Looking at
presence
Jian
even
Shen,
when
who
seated
seemed to
in
turn
the
a blind eye
establishment.
to all of this,
Of course,
the faces
not everyone
of the
could
36
sense it like
lords
Jian
and
Shen,
108
unless
kings
their
were
senses
overcome
were as
by
powerful
fury
as
and
his.
regret.
As
As
well
for
as
him,
some
he used
undisguised
the
shock.
effects of the mask
This was
to
the
hide
first time
himself
they had heard
completely.
of and seen a
Unless there were
primordial
grand
realm
primes who
expert from
stood at the
outside.
very peak,
They understood
no one
the
could see through
restrictions
him.
of entry to
The
this
Darkstar
world very
Emperor
well.
really is powerful.
They could not be older than
I'm
1,000
still not
years.
his opponent right now.
These people had all
Jian
used
Shen
countless
became
years to
slightly
reach god
cautious.
kings.
But
In the
now that they
Darkstar
discovered
race,
a primordial
the only
realm
existence
expert
he
who was
feared
less
was
than
the
1,000 years
Darkstar
old,
Emperor.
they were
I
deeply
can't
shocked
sense
by his
sacred
cultivation
feathers'
speed.
presence.
However,
Now,
Bai
I'm
Jin had
certain he's
completely
in
calmed
the
down.
imperial palace.
He looked at the droplet
so
of essence
important to the
blood
Darkstar
hovered in
race
Jian
that
Shen's
perhaps the
palm and
Darkstar
thought
Emperor's
of what
watching
Jian Shen
over
had
him
just
personally.
Bai
Jian
Jin's
Shen felt
expression
some
became
pity.
agonized.
However,
he dared not to look through the
he
imperial
asked sternly,
palace carelessly
"Sir,
with the senses
have you
of
come
his soul.
specially for the
If the
divine
Darkstar
beast?"
Emperor sensed
That's
him,
right,
saving
the divine
sacred
beast
feather
you've
would
captured is like family to me. Difficult. I just never thought that your dark star race would treat him like this. At the 10 divine halls that also hovered in the air, Jian Chen's expression became humongous. Killing intent. They all differed in appearance and were the slightest disguise. God artifacts. His gaze landed on Bai Jin and he asked coldly, with their artifact spirits dead, do all 36 cities of your dark star race possess even without investigation? Blood? Jian Chen knew the 10 divine halls were the 10 absolute existences only second. I must admit that you are very powerful and you've probably reached the primordial realm authority in the dark star race, but it's impossible impossible if you want to save the divine beast from our hands on top, because infinite primes number to several dozen within our 10 divine halls. The 10 hall masters and vice hall masters are all experts who have reached the primordial realm in the dark star race were handled by the 10 divine halls. They are much more powerful. As for the 10 divine halls, let me give you a word of advice. Each of them would wield power. You better leave here before the upper echelon of my race discover you, to be the or all of them will definitely be mobilized if they find out a primordial realm expert has set foot here and is trying to save the divine towns and villages. You will be slain regardless of the consequences. Eyes narrowed and turned towards one of the divine halls. Is coming. The upper echelon of my race will never allow even the slightest element of unpredictability to exist at such an important time. His face was frigid, and he quickly made his way over to the teleportation formation with several realm experts into retreat. Afterwards, there was a flash of light, and he had already departed managed to infiltrate the race. A second heavenly layer ceremony that controlled the fate of the entire race would probably be postponed. The teleportation formation in such a hurry. So he should be going to the Dark Knight City. Chapter 2732. Left to their own devices, Jian-Shen stared at the divine hall currently in power. Even though Bai Jin did not go into detail, the Imperial Palace was being watched over by the Dark Star Emperor. So Jian-Shen would never probe his killing intent a little. However, there were no qualms with the 10 divine halls below. Great ceremony? The senses of his soul extended over the great ceremony, approaching the 7th divine hall. So don't even think about completing the Dark Star race's great ceremony after fusing with the sliver of chaotic force. Coldly as his eyes shone brightly with killing intent. It would be very difficult to discover his existence unless the disparity in strength was just too great to every single member of their race. Of the Dark Star race, not only would they be able to break the limitation on cultivation, it was also one large step closer. Even the Imperial Palace does not appear to give off of the Dark Star race would treat the great ceremony with the utmost importance. Seems like they've had it easy for far too long. Even some people who valued it more than their own lives. It'll save me quite a lot of trouble. As a result, when they heard Jian-Shen say he wanted to get in the way of the great ceremony, it made sense. All of their expressions changed was rigidly stratified, and they were not under any external threat. Jian-Shen, as a primordial realm expert, leapt up in anger like a cat that had its tail stepped on. Was there anyone bold enough to swoop around as they glared at him furiously? In such a safe environment, the outcome would be the same even if they had defensive formations. How dare you get in the way of our great ceremony? The Dark Star world was not of my race will make you feel it originated from a colossal beast. You would wish you were dead. The production of the veins of energy were limited, you really so avoiding the use of formations would great emperor should have never let you outsiders into the territory of our race, the 7th divine hall easily. Although there were no formations among my race should have been slaughtered. He could not afford to be careless even in the slightest. Everyone. He carefully made his way deeper and really don't hold preparations to pull out at any time. They actually want to get in the way of our people inside the 7th divine hall, and he still wants to save that divine god kings. To be able to sacrifice itself in our great ceremony, perfect arrangement, that's the greatest honor the divine and managing the various miscellaneous matters within the Dark Star race. Grew colder as he listened to these voices. Divine hall. He was like a piece of permafrost. The pulses of the presence of 3 infinite primes. From the strength of the strongest, it should have reached and the silence heavenly layer behind infinite prime. He clasped his hands at Jian-Shen. Were at the 3rd and 4th heavenly layer. With your cultivation at the primordial realm that left earlier, you would be a major figure possessing great weight in my race. 4 infinite primes. So why must you become enemies with whether it's all of them? If you're willing to take a step back, we're more than willing to forget our grievances and become friends with 50 infinite primes. My race can also provide various Jian-Shen became rather surprised by the calculation. We even have the power to make you into a chaotic primordial realm expert. But the most crucial part about this is that you have to abandon the divine beast. The primordial realm experts directly affect from the success rate of our great ceremony. It must be anyone used as an offering. Reach the primordial realm with that, in such an environment all possessed great I'll be honest with you as well great wisdom and great fortune. They were prodigies amongst prodigies, and they had remained at their current realms for an extremely long amount of time. If they were in the saints' world, any primordial realm expert of the Dark Star race could challenge those at higher cultivation levels. The 6th heavenly layer infinite prime should be the 7th hall master. I have to treat him like a 7th heavenly layer infinite prime from the saints' world at the very least, Jian-Shen thought, and immediately became even more careful. As he ventured deeper, Jian-Shen captured the conversation between the 3 infinite primes. Please don't worry, hall master. Since Duff has already ventured to the Dark Knight City personally, nothing will happen to the droplet of the divine beast's essence blood allocated there. Even if the city lord of Dark Knight City, Bai Jin, has experienced a mishap and passed away in the 2 world mountains, Duff should be able to retrieve the droplet of essence blood with his strength. The fourth heavenly layer Infinite Prime said in the depths of the seventh divine hall. Jian Chen could only hide his senses carefully by remaining far away, afraid of approaching them. As a result, he did not know how these people looked like. He could only capture their voices that had carried over. It'll be all fine and dandy if the essence blood really can be retrieved. But if it can't, how am I supposed to face the Emperor? Both of you know exactly how important the matters connected to the essence blood are. If something really does happen, sigh, the seventh hall master said sternly, with a tinge of worry. But soon afterwards, the seventh hall master seemed to think of something. He suddenly emitted an icy cold killing intent and his voice coldened as well. An outsider seems to be the perpetrator of everything that happened in the Dark Knight City. These outsiders have caused quite the problem for my race this time. Send orders to the 100 Saint City to execute all of imprisoned outsiders. Leave none alive, execute all of them? Hallmaster, this doesn't seem too wise. After all, our race still needs to rely on them to supply us with some resources from the outside world, said the third heavenly layer Infinite Prime. The day of the great ceremony is approaching. If we don't clean up the outsiders now, they'll definitely affect our great ceremony drastically. The Dark Knight City's the best example with what they've done. Although some of the resources from the outside world are crucial to our race, how can they compare to our great ceremony? The seventh hall master said coldly. Chapter 2736, The Land of Soul Destruction, Hall Master. The organizations in the 100 Saint City possess great status outside. Most of the valuable resources our race requires is under the control of these organizations. We've already established our might by taking the 100 Saint City, but if we execute all the prisoners, we will have offended these major organizations completely. If they stop providing our race with resources because of this, it'll be quite the impact, said the fourth heavenly layer Infinite Prime. His name was Enlai and he was a Vice Hall Master of the 7th Divine Hall. The third heavenly layer Vice Hall Master, K-Soul, said as well, Enlai's right. After all, the Emperors personally permitted the existence of these outsiders. Hallmaster, don't you think we should dash? Enough. However, before K-Soul could finish talking, he had been interrupted by the 7th Hall Master. The 7th Hall Master said in irritation, I've already made up my mind about this, so don't say anything more. Immediately order the people watching over the 100 Saint City to execute all outsiders imprisoned there. Leave none alive. Enlai and K-Soul looked at one another. They could see each other's powerlessness. The 7th Hall Master's prejudice towards the outsiders was just too deep. He wanted to use the great ceremony as an excuse this time to slaughter all the outsiders from the 100 Saint City. The two of them even suspected that if it were not for the Emperor personally permitting the existence of these outsiders, the 7th Hall Master might not have just dealt with the outsiders from the 100 Saint City. Probably all the outsiders in the entire Dark Star world would be facing a disaster. Alright, is there any news of Kuan Tian recently? The 7th Hall Master asked suddenly, but when he mentioned Kuan Tian's name, his gaze sharpened slightly. The 5th Hall Master hasn't appeared since he entered the land of soul destruction 3 years ago. He must still be in seclusion within the land of soul destruction in an attempt to achieve a breakthrough, said K-Soul. The 7th Hall Master immediately sneered with that. After reaching the primordial realm, every step forward for our Dark Star race is filled with difficulty, and if you want to break through, you have to go through countless trials. It's almost impossible for any breakthroughs to happen, let alone at such a high cultivation level, going from the 5th heavenly layer to the 6th heavenly layer. Kuan Tian wants to break through to the 6th heavenly layer to rival me, but how can it just be that easy? And he's entered the land of soul destruction. It's rumored that the land of soul destruction is a special zone formed by the planetary beast's brain after it died. It's filled with an extremely disorderly and brutal will. The disorderly will affects the soul severely. If you can't fend it off, even injuries to the soul will only be considered as a light consequence. It'll be bad once your consciousness is shaken up and you go crazy. And the dangers of the land of soul destruction do not just lie with the disorderly will. What's even more powerful is the indestructible slivers of consciousness that the planetary beast left behind. Once you're being ravaged by the indestructible consciousness, even we primordial realm experts can die from the slightest carelessness. It's been 3 years since Kuan-Tian's left. Aside from our great emperor of extraordinary talent, no one's remained in the land of soul destruction for so long. Kuan-Tian, looks like you've really got the determination to cross the point of no return for the sake of your breakthrough to the 6th heavenly layer, sneered the 7th Hall Master in a slightly mocking manner. The senses of Jian Chen's soul remained in the 7th Divine Hall for a while, but even when the conversation ended, he had not heard any information about Sacred Feather. His senses quietly retreated from the 7th Divine Hall. Although he already knew the many cultivators imprisoned in the 100 Saint City would be under life-threatening danger, Jin Hong's group was close to leaving the 2 World Mountains as well. However, the land of soul destruction that the 7th Hall Master mentioned did pique Jian Chen's interests. Kuan-Tian that the 7th Hall Master speaks of should be the 5th Hall Master. The 5th Hall Masters entered the land of soul destruction. The planetary beast's brain formed the land of soul destruction after it died. It's filled with the planetary beast's indestructible slivers of consciousness, which can threaten primordial realm experts. The planetary beast should be the colossal space beast that formed the Dark Star world. As he pondered, Jian Chen's eyes gradually lit up. If he wanted to save Sacred Feather, then he had to engage the Dark Star race in an open confrontation. A clash with them was unavoidable. If he could make the Dark Star race lose a few primordial realm experts before the battle had erupted, it would reduce his pressure slightly. The land of soul destruction. A map immediately appeared in Jian Chen's head. The map clearly detailed the boundaries between the 2 World Mountains and the Dark Star world. The 2 World Mountains were blurry on the map, only an empty region without any detailed explanations. However, the geography of the Dark Star world was much clearer. The 36 major cities and the various smaller cities, towns and villages were all labeled on there. Jian Chen had discovered the map detailing the entire Dark Star world in Baijin's space ring. Although he did not take anything from the space ring, he did memorize the map. He discovered the location of the land of soul destruction very quickly, before leaving the capital city of the Dark Star race without any hesitation at all. The capital city was being watched over by the Dark Star Emperor. Not only would his movements be limited if he remained there, any benefits he could derive would be insignificant. He could not find out about too many things. As a result, he might as well go to the land of soul destruction to search for the 5th Hall Master. At least he would be able to do whatever he wanted there. Perhaps he might have even been able to force out some reliable information about Sacred Feather from the 5th Hall Master. The land of soul destruction was a zone of absolute danger in the Dark Star race. Rarely did anyone go there. Only members of the Dark Star race who were in urgent need of a breakthrough would take this risk in an attempt to benefit from the will that the planetary beast left behind. However, most of these people would end up remaining there for all of eternity, dead. Even among the few people who managed to make it out alive, their souls would be damaged and their minds would be in a mess, leaving behind incurable side effects of varying degrees. There were very few people who could actually benefit from the land of soul destruction. They could be described as people who appeared once in 1,000 years. Several hours later, Jian Chen was already standing outside the land of soul destruction. Looking over, the land of soul destruction seemed a little like a valley that was surrounded by a chain of mountains. The surroundings of the land of soul destruction were all huge mountains that reached into the clouds, forming a huge circular shape, enveloping the land of soul destruction. The path of just several thousand meters wide right in front of him served as the only entrance into the land of soul destruction. The land of soul destruction was filled with chilly winds. The freezing billows slammed against the mountain rock, creating strange whistles and screams. Combined with the low, dark clouds that churned in the sky, it seemed like a place where demons danced. What a disorderly will! Standing at the entrance of the desolate land of soul destruction, Jian Chen frowned and became extremely solemn. Even without entering the land of soul destruction, he could already sense a powerful will that even threatened him. And the further he ventured inside, the stronger this sense of threat would become. Chapter 2737. Kun Tian. At the entrance of the land of soul destruction, Jian Chen hovered 1,000 meters in the air while giving off the presence of the Dark Star race. He disguised his strength as a late God King. He carefully studying the land of soul destruction as he hovered in the air, before flying in through the entrance that spans several thousand meters across. He did not move quickly. He moved steadily, maintaining his high degree of vigilance. He was strong enough to run around freely within the Dark Star race, where even if he encountered their greatest expert, the Dark Star Emperor, he had complete confidence in retreating unscathed. However, the land of soul destruction was a still special place formed from the planetary beast's brain after all. Anything that a terrifying, colossal beast on par to 9th heavenly layer grand primes left behind could be life-threatening to infinite primes. Jian Chen was confident, but he could not afford to be careless even in the slightest within the land of soul destruction. As he approached the land of soul destruction, the chilly winds that swept through the place gradually reached Jian Chen as well. Jian Chen's mind immediately quivered as he felt cold from the bottom of his heart. The coldness pierced his soul. The souls of cultivators had no perception of heat, but in that moment, Jian Chen's soul truly felt a cold sensation. The chilly winds could directly affect the souls of cultivators, even including primordial realm experts. These chilly winds and the dark clouds in the surroundings are actually all a form of energy of the soul, or in other words, it's the slivers of consciousness and will the planetary beasts left behind with its death. Jian Chen grew cautious. He could sense that the depths of the land of soul destruction were even more dangerous than directly confronting the Dark Star Emperor, who was no weaker than a chaotic prime. Finally, Jian Chen flew into the land of soul destruction and formally set foot within this huge valley. However, a great beast's roar directly rang out in Jian Chen's soul, catching him off guard. The beast's roar was earth-shaking and extremely brutal, even containing the great power that could shake up the starry skies. It was like a bolt of lightning, directly erupting in Jian Chen's head with endless might. Jian Chen's levitating body immediately shuddered. His complexion changed rapidly and he immediately closed his eyes, using his full strength to gather the power of his soul and consolidate his mind. With the beast's roar, a colossal space beast, even larger than a star, condensed in Jian Chen's head. It was extremely blurry, like a ball of mist, impossible to make out any features. However, the tremendous pressure it gave off shook up Jian Chen's soul uncontrollably. This is something formed from the collapsed spiritual energy after the planetary beasts died. With Jian Chen's current knowledge, he recognized the constituents of the beast figure in a single glance. He felt shocked. He was still a primordial realm expert after all. He could endure a soul attack at such a degree, but if it had been a God King instead, even peak God King, they would have just ended up dead before the tremendous roar. He had just set foot in the land of soul destruction and he had endured such a powerful attack, which forced Jian Chen to re-evaluate the dangers of the land of soul destruction. However, before Jian Chen had the time to make a response, the colossal figure in his head suddenly moved. A huge claw swung down from right above with the might that could subdue stars. Although the actual strength of the claw was nowhere close to being able to overwhelm stars, that was the endless might Jian Chen had truly sensed when the claw fell. This was the might the planetary beast possessed when it was still alive. Even though it was dead now, it could still deliver some of this might through the energy of its spirit. This was an unadorned soul attack, a blow to the mind. Jian Chen could only consolidate his mind and gather his soul, facing it in his toughest form. He was like a tiny tree seedling among raging winds. Against the winds, there was nothing the seedling could do apart from deeply embedding its roots into the earth to stabilize itself, letting the winds ravage itself freely. When the planetary beast's attack landed, Jian Chen's soul was violently shaken up. Even his soul that had mutated into something extraordinary felt piercing pain, followed by dizziness. With his soul under attack, his consciousness momentarily blurred, but in that moment, his perception of the outside world plunged completely. Fortunately, he was not fighting someone, or the consequences would be unimaginable. Jian Chen was alarmed. He had only just set foot in the land of soul destruction, and he had already experienced such a violent soul attack. The dangers of the land of soul destruction completely exceeded his expectations. This was because this entirely were soul attacks. Before these attacks, the defenses of his chaotic body were completely useless. A soul attack like this shouldn't last too long, or it's impossible for the fifth Hall Master Kun Tian to remain here for 3 years with his strength. Let alone 3 years, even half a year is impossible, Jian Chen thought. Holding on to that thought, he lasted for an entire hour like this. During that hour, the attacks his soul experienced did not weaken at all. Instead, they gradually became stronger, while the planetary beast in his head used attacks of various types against him as well. At times, it would take the form of a colossal beast, and at others, it would assume various human forms, or even dangers that could appear in outer space. These human figures all originated from the fragmented memories of the planetary beast, while Jian Chen found the blurry dangers of outer space to be chilling. In just an hour, I've used up around half of the power of my soul. Just how did the fifth Hall Master last 3 years here? This isn't right. Jian Chen endured the soul attacks of the land of soul destruction strenuously as he began to look around. Very soon, he discovered something. The further away from the ground, the denser the will and slivers of consciousness from the planetary beast would be. The opposite was true as well. Jian Chen immediately descended, dropping from 1,000 meters to 500, and he instantly saw results. The attacks on his soul weakened drastically, and he eased up. I see. Jian Chen came to an understanding and cursed himself for his confusion. He immediately landed on the ground and found a safe place to recover the power of his soul. In the land of soul destruction, he could meet the fifth Hall Master Kun Tian at any time, so he needed to maintain his peak condition at all times. Just as Jian Chen recovered the power of his soul, a figure sat on a boulder that was as smooth as a mirror several million kilometers away. He was a middle-aged man. His countenance was determined and cold as he gave off the presence of a primordial realm expert. He was the fifth Hall Master, Kun Tian. But right now, Kun Tian's face was rather twisted. The primordial realm presence he gave off fluctuated with great instability, sometimes strong and sometimes weak, sometimes brutal and sometimes violent. Arg! Suddenly Kun Tian stood up. His eyes snapped open, revealing a faint smear of redness and craziness. He roared at the sky, and the great sound wave reverberated through the surroundings, causing the dark clouds formed from the spiritual energy of the planetary beast to surge violently. He punched the boulder he sat on, and the brutal force smashed it to pieces. Afterwards, he seemed to go insane, roaring out furiously as he constantly struck the ground with his hands. The muscles on his face twisted, like he was in pain. Chapter 2738, Loss of Memory. The fifth Hall Master had remained in the land of soul destruction for 3 years. He was desperate for a breakthrough, so rushed headfirst into danger, wanting to forcefully fuse with a sliver of the spiritual energy the planetary beast left behind, which deeply affected his mind in the end. His mind was stuck in an intense conflict with the spiritual energy of the planetary beast, reducing him to such a mad state. And his power was unstable. His energy that belonged to the fifth heavenly layer of infinite prime fluctuated violently in his body, surging like boiling water. Although the power belonged to the fifth heavenly layer, it was much more powerful than most fifth heavenly layer infinite primes of the saint's world. This was because the power was just too pure. It seemed to be highly concentrated essence, without the slightest impurity. It would take an extremely long amount of bitter cultivation to refine energy to such a level. This length would probably be measured in the tens of millions of years. Arg! Kun Tian roared out constantly. He slammed the ground with his hands crazily at times and clutched his head as he rolled on the ground at others. He seemed to be in great pain. His pain lasted for a total of 6 hours before seemingly reaching the limit he could endure. He produced a thunderous roar at the sky, and all of his energy seemed to lose control. A violent energy that belonged to the fifth heavenly layer, or even on par to some sixth heavenly layer infinite primes, erupted from his body, sweeping through the land of soul destruction as a powerful storm. As the violent energy swept through the land of soul destruction, the entire place seemed to surge like the raging seas, producing startling waves. It was utterly earth-shaking. Even the slivers of consciousness that filled the place became abnormally active. After venting out like that, the fifth hall master gradually calmed down from his violent state. The madness in his eyes gradually faded away as his pulsating energy slowly settled down. Afterwards, he tottered and just collapsed on the ground, as if he had fallen unconscious. Of course, he was not dead. His life force did not weaken at all, instead gradually strengthening. Even his presence strengthened bit by bit. Jian Chen, who sat near the entrance to recover the power of his soul, snapped open his eyes. He seemed to sense something. His nonchalant gaze sharpened drastically in that moment as his eyes shone brightly. His gaze pierced through space, landing on the depths of the land of soul destruction. The presence of the primordial realms erupted up ahead. It's around the fifth heavenly layer of infinite prime. It must be the fifth hall master, Kuntian, thought Jianchen. The land of soul destruction was filled with slivers of the planetary beast's consciousness. Once he released the senses of his soul, he would be clashing with these slivers of consciousness, so it was inconvenient for him to unleash the senses of his soul in the land of soul destruction. At the same time, under the influence of these slivers of consciousness, his senses in general had weakened drastically. Without these abilities, it was as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack for him to find someone in the land of soul destruction. But it was perfect now. Just when he worried about finding the fifth hall master, Kun Tian would actually create a disturbance like this for him, allowing Jianchen to locate him immediately. Since I know his location, it'll be much easier to find him. There's no hurry. Fifth hall master, once my soul recovers, it will be the time for you to die. Heavy killing intent flashed through Jianchen's eyes. The land of soul destruction was the perfect place for killing someone. Due to the special environment, it served as a natural barrier, severely suppressing any activity involving battles between primordial realm experts. He had no need to worry about making too great of a disturbance and alerting the capital city of the Dark Star race when he fought here. Perhaps I should find a way to draw out the other primordial realm experts of the Dark Star race and then kill them one by one. I've developed grievances with the Dark Star race already, so conflict is inevitable. If they lose a few primordial realm experts, it would instead reduce my pressure when saving Sacred Feather, Jianchen thought. Another figure suddenly flashed through his head. That was the primordial realm expert who had emerged from the 7th Divine Hall and gone to the Dark Night City, Duff. If he killed him by surprise in the Two World Mountains, would he be able to push the responsibility of Duff's death onto the primordial realm life-devouring beasts within the Two World Mountains once more? As he thought, the power of Jianchen's soul recovered even faster. In order to save time, he even took out some heavenly resources that specialized in recovering the power of the soul from his space ring and ingested them. Of course, none of these heavenly resources had reached the god tier. They were not particularly effective on primordial realm experts, but they were better than nothing. It could speed up the process slightly. Almost a day later, the power of Jianchen's soul had recovered to 90% of his peak condition. Before it had completely recovered, he rushed off in the direction of the 5th Hall Master. Jianchen flew 10 meters above the ground. The laws of space pulsed around him, so he moved extremely quickly, crossing 1,000 kilometers with each instant. He obviously found this speed slightly slow for someone who had grasped the laws of space. However, this was the land of soul destruction. It was a special place where the slivers of the planetary beast's consciousness affected everything. It was also filled with danger, so he had to travel carefully. Several millions of kilometers away, Kun Tian slowly woke up on the ground. He opened his eyes and looked at the gloomy sky shrouded in gray clouds. There was uncertainty in his eyes. He found the sky to be both familiar and unfamiliar. What is this place? Kun Tian slowly sat up. He scanned the surroundings with his eyes as his confusion deepened. He suddenly had no idea where this place was, but he just had a feeling that he was somewhat familiar with here. But soon afterwards, Kun Tian came to a realization and ravished with joy. He called out without the slightest care in the world, "I've broken through. I've actually broken through. I, Kun Tian, have finally broken free from the restraints of the fifth heavenly layer, formally reaching the sixth heavenly layer." Ha! Kun Tian laughed aloud with his head tilted back. He was so elated that he danced around. He was in extremely high spirits. But suddenly he seemed to realize something else. He quickly calmed down and he became confused. Kunan. Who's Kun Tian? Why do I call myself Kun Tian? Am I Kun Tian? But why don't I remember it? Who am I? What's my name? Just who am I exactly? Why am I here? And where is this place? I seem to know what this place is, but why can't I recall it? His joy from breaking through to the sixth heavenly layer was tossed aside in the blink of an eye. Kun Tian sat on the ground in some dejection as he smacked his head forcefully, thinking hard. He suddenly discovered that he was no longer certain who he was. Apart from knowing that he had broken through to the sixth heavenly layer which he had long yearned for, he could not remember anything else. Chapter 2739, Killing Kun Tian. 1. By now, Jian Chen had arrived here as well. He used the properties of the mask to disguise himself with the presence of the Dark Star race, and a black mask covered his face. Who knew what it was made of? But it could block out the senses of the soul. He did not hide himself. Walking on foot, he strided towards Kun Tian, who knelt on the ground. His pair of exposed eyes studied Kun Tian's current condition as they shone with a strange light. There's something wrong with Kun Tian. It seems like he's lost a part of his memories? Jian Chen was surprised. He had never been expecting this. He could obviously tell that Kun Tian had already broken through, formally reaching the sixth heavenly layer of infinite prime. This part did not surprise him. Kun Tian had sensed Jian Chen a long time ago as well. He discovered him to be a native of the world, but just too weak, only a mere peak god king, so he did not take him seriously. With his back to Jian Chen, he completely ignored Jian Chen as he continued to frown and think hard. He discovered that he had forgotten many things. Apart from knowing he had been constantly working hard to break through to the sixth heavenly layer, he was uncertain about everything else, including his own identity and name. He recalled as hard as he could in attempt to remember some things, but no matter how he racked his brains, he could not recall anything apart from finding the landscape here hazy and unfamiliar, yet also familiar. Even the name he had just mentioned, Kun Tian, sounded unfamiliar and familiar simultaneously to him. Jian Chen stood 10 meters away from Kun Tian. He looked at Kun Tian, who ignored him as his eyes flashed. After some consideration, he said with a raspy voice, "Kun Tian, you really are injured. Looks like the Hall Master was right. You haven't been able to remain unscathed after remaining 3 years in the land of soul destruction." Kun Tian seized up. He did not pay any attention to Jian Chen originally, because his presence was only at peak God King. To a sixth heavenly layer infinite prime, he was no different from an ant. However, only when Jian Chen referred to him as Kun Tian did he finally take the ant-like clansman seriously. Kun Tian slowly stood up and straightened himself from his kneeling posture. He turned around and stared at the masked Jian Chen with a cold gaze. He frowned. "You know this Hall Master?" As soon as he said that, Kun Tian became uncertain and confused once again. He wondered to himself, "This Hall Master? Why do I refer to myself like that?" He thought hard, but even after quite a while, he discovered nothing. He had already forgotten everything. Perhaps many of his actions and ways of speaking were just ingrained in him. He had referred to himself as this Hall Master for many years, so even when he had forgotten everything, he still possessed much of the same reactions, speech, actions, bearing, and so on. Jian Chen's eyes shone. His senses were extremely sharp, so he noticed all of Kun Tian's reactions and expressions. He smiled gently. "Of course I know you. You're the master of the 5th hall of the 10 great divine halls of the Dark Star race, Kun Tian." Jian Chen paused before continuing. "It's like the hall master can see the future. He was certain something would happen to your cultivation within the 3 years you've remained in the land of soul destruction, or maybe you were dead already. By the looks of things now, you'll still be alive, but your soul is severely damaged such that you've lost your memories. You don't even know who you are anymore." As he said that, Jianchen felt some pity. He originally wanted to extract some information about Sacred Feather from Kun Tian, but looking at his state now, let alone extracting information, Kun Tian did not even know who he was himself. The fifth hall master? Kun Tian. The fifth hall master. Kun Tian. Hearing what Jianchen said, Kun Tian sank into his thoughts as he murmured to himself. Although he had not remembered anything, he found the fifth divine hall to be extremely familiar. Suddenly, Kun Tian looked at Jianchen and his eyes shone brightly. "Who are you?" When he asked that, his gaze gradually sharpened. His dignified expression made his questions seem absolute. He sensed killing intent, an extremely heavy killing intent that gave him an ill omen. It was impossible for the late God King Ant before him to give off something like that. "All you have to know is that I've come to kill you. You don't need to know anything other than that." Since Kun Tian had already lost his memories and knew nothing anymore, Jianchen obviously had no need to waste any words on him. He attacked resolutely as soon as he finished talking. His presence remained at peak God King, but when he struck out, he produced an earth-shaking disturbance. His body shone brilliantly as he became enveloped by light. He seemed like a miniature sun, dazzling and blinding. Jianchen did not use any weapons. Against Kun Tian, who had broken through to the sixth heavenly layer, he needed to be able to use his full strength. There was not a single supreme quality saint artifact or half-god artifact that could withstand Kun Tian's attacks. He reached out in the empty air and a streak of resplendent light immediately condensed. As the light surged, it pulsed with enough power to phase a primordial realm expert. Just the streak of light he had casually condensed was much more powerful than a supreme quality saint artifact. Swish! The streak of light pierced through the air, moving extremely quickly, as if it had broken free from the restraints of time and space. It immediately arrived before Kun Tian, stabbing towards his soul. "You're not a god king, but at the primordial realm." Kun Tian cried out and his expression changed drastically. The strength that this disguised primordial realm expert had erupted with utterly shocked him. Not only was the incoming sword chi startlingly fast, the power it contained gave him chills too. In that critical moment, Kun Tian's body shuddered gently and he immediately faded. The sword chi in Jianchen's hand directly pierced Kun Tian's forehead. It pierced his head all the way through. However, Jianchen's expression remained the same. His gaze was just as cold as before, filled with killing intent. With a thought, chaotic force immediately filled his entire body, unleashing his full defenses. Boom! It was also at that moment that Kun Tian, who had his head pierced, exploded completely. The tremendous energy formed a terrifying storm of destruction, swallowing Jianchen. The might of the energy storm was not something an infinite prime who had just stepped into the sixth heavenly layer could unleash. It was completely on par to the full-powered strike of a peak sixth heavenly layer infinite prime. That was because the energy was just too pure. It had been highly concentrated without a single shred of impurity. In the saints' world, there was not a single primordial realm expert who could refine their energy to such purity. There was no more peace in the entirety of the land of soul destruction with Kun Tian's explosion. In the air, the dense, dark clouds surged violently like a constantly transforming fiends, brandishing its claws and teeth. The bone-chilling winds screamed sharply, like wailing ghosts, yet also like the roar of a colossal beast. Jianchen's surroundings shone brightly within the storm of energy from Kun Tian's explosion. He protected himself with the laws of the sword as he stood unwavering. He slashed suddenly with the sword chi in his hand. With that slash, he seemed to bisect the world. The entire space had been cut in half by him. The raging storm of energy parted around him, without touching him at all. Jianchen took a step, appearing thousands of meters away like he had teleported. The sword chi in his hand surged with light as he stabbed at the empty space in front of him. Chapter 2740, Killing Kun Tian, 2. Jian Chen had already seen through that Kun Tian himself had not exploded. Instead, he used some kind of secret technique to condense another body out of powerful energy. It was similar to a clone. However, the clone was extraordinary. When it self-destructed, it was so powerful that it was already equivalent to the full-powered strike of a fifth heavenly layer infinite prime. And as soon as the clone was created, Kun Tian had silently hidden himself in the space several thousand meters away, erasing his presence so he was completely concealed. He used the self-destruction of his clone to confuse the enemy, or even heavily injure them, while he could hide away and look for an opening to launch a killing strike at all times. It had to be mentioned that this was a highly effective killing method. If a fifth heavenly layer infinite prime from the Saints' world faced this attack, it really was possible for Kun Tian to kill them off in a single strike. Even sixth heavenly layer infinite primes on par to Kun Tian could die from the slightest carelessness. However, his opponent just happened to be Jian Chen. With Jian Chen's laws of space, Kun Tian's attempt to hide in space without the laws of space was like trying to teach a fish how to swim to Jian Chen. Bang! With a heavy rumble, the space rippled violently like water. Jian Chen's stab forced out Kun Tian from the space there. Kun Tian was stern. He held a sword that was 3 fingers wide in his hand. The sword shone brightly as it gave off pulses of energy. However, he had been forced into a stagger by Jian Chen's attack. Although Jian Chen did not have the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, he was still stronger than Kun Tian, who had just broken through to the 6th heavenly layer. Even when Kun Tian's battle prowess was greater than most other 6th heavenly layer infinite primes from the Saints' world, he still lost the upper hand in a clash against Jian Chen. Just who are you? Since when did our Dark Star race possess an expert like you? Kun Tian growled, but as soon as he finished talking, he became confused. He could no longer recall what experts the Dark Star race possessed. Jian Chen understood. He knew Kun Tian had lost his memories and had forgotten many things, but he would always absent-mindedly mention some matters from before his memory loss. This was because some memories and impressions were just too deep, as if they were deeply embedded in his soul. Even if he had lost his memories on the surface, his subconsciousness would still remember them. Kun Tian's memory loss won't last for too long. He only needs the slightest reminding and he'll probably recall it all, thought Jian Chen. He glanced past the sword in Kun Tian's hand and his heart immediately thumped. Kun Tian's sword was a low-quality god artifact, an undamaged low-quality god artifact. He could tell from the laws of the sword around the sword that Kun Tian also walked the way of the sword. Immediately, Jian Chen's killing intent erupted like a volcano. In that moment, his intent to kill Kun Tian became unprecedented. I have to kill you today. Jian Chen was utterly determined. He said nothing as his gaze became icy. He condensed another strand of sword chi and attacked Kun Tian again. The sword in Kun Tian's hand immediately erupted with the might of a god artifact, also stabbing at Jian Chen. The sword shone with dazzling light, cutting a thin crack in the space, while sword slashes began to pepper the tough ground beneath him. Jian Chen sneered. He controlled space and disturbed the area between them. Kun Tian's sword immediately slowed down, while Jian Chen's sword chi suddenly erupted in speed. Kun Tian's eyes narrowed, but he did not become flustered at all. A low-quality god artifact armor immediately covered his body. Jian Chen's sword chi struck Kun Tian's armor, but he failed to penetrate it. He only managed to knock Kun Tian away. Seeing this, Jian Chen could not help but frown. Kun Tian was not weak, possessing the battle prowess of a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime. Now that he was equipped with 2 god artifacts as well, both his offense and defense had increased further, only making him stronger. Killing him like this would take quite the effort. Of course, just Kun Tian alone could not give him as much pressure as he experienced right now. Most importantly, he gained a further understanding of the strength of the 10 Hall Masters through Kun Tian. If the 10 Hall Masters all possessed god artifacts, that would be bad news to him. Dark Star Imperial Technique, Sky Splitter. Suddenly, Kun Tian bellowed out. The energy on him surged out violently and the might of a god-tier battle skill flooded the surroundings. He swung the sword in his hand overhead at Jian Qin in the distance. Pressure filled the depths of the land of soul destruction. His sword fell with a destructive might, as if the entire sky was about to be cut in half by that slash. An invisible, restraining force appeared and Jian Qin felt his body sink. Not only were his movements restricted, his presence had been completely locked onto as well. Given the situation, even if he fled this place with the laws of space, he would not be able to dodge the attack of the God-tier battle skill. Jian Qin's expression remained the same, calm and composed. However, his eyes became scorching white in that instant, as if they were filled with endless sword qi. He used the will of the ultimate way of the sword. The power of the laws of the sword immediately surged, becoming even more powerful than before. However, Jian Qin's expression became rather strange, because when he used the will of the ultimate way of the sword, he could actually vaguely sense the location of the might of the world from the God-tier battle skill. God-tier battle skills possessed the might of the world. This basically certified a God-tier battle skill to be a God-tier battle skill. Jian Qin had experienced it many times before. But right now, when he used the will, it felt completely different from before. His senses of the world were even clearer and even more precise. In the past, he had viewed this might of the world as an embodiment of the laws and ways of the world. It was not just him either. Basically, all cultivators held the same view. But right now, it had overturned his previous understanding of this might of the world. The might of the world was more like a form of will than an embodiment of laws or ways. It was a will that originated from the world. It was as if using a God-tier battle skill could gain the support of the will of the world. The will of the world? The world has a will as well? Or should I say, this is only because of the special circumstances in which the Dark Star world was formed that I get this mistaken impression? In that moment, Jian Qin felt rather confused. However, this was the first time he had used the will of the ultimate way of the sword against a God-tier battle skill, so he was not certain whether it would be the same in the outside world. Moreover, having reached his current level of comprehension, his understanding of the world was much deeper than before. He clearly knew that in order to possess a will, there required thought. Wills could be described as a form of thought. The God-tier battle skill arrived extremely quickly. In that critical moment, Jian Qin did not have much time to think at all. When he sensed the will of the world, he immediately turned his will of the ultimate way of the sword into an invisible sword, thrusting it over viciously. There were no ground-shaking disturbances, no violent eruptions or booms. All of it happened silently. When Jian Qin stabbed out with his will, he felt like he had severed a thin, frail string. Afterwards, Kun Tian's God-tier battle skill seemed to lose the very core of its power, its might plummeting abruptly. In a single instant, it went from the God-tier battle skill from earlier to the most simple energy attack. Chapter 2741 replaced an attack like that obviously posed no threat to Jian Qin. Let alone a threat, it was not even enough for Jian Qin to bat an eye. He nullified Kun Tian's attack by casually emitting a strand of sword qi. The God-tier battle skill Kun Tian used failed to create any waves in the battle at all. Kun Tian was stunned. He watched all of this unfold in disbelief. Although there were many things he had forgotten and completely responded with his instincts, he was still not an idiot after all. He could obviously sense just how startling his attack was. How could such a mighty God-tier battle skill only possess such insignificant power? How's that possible? It's impossible for my attack to be so weak. Why did it feel like it ran out of power towards the end? Kun Tian murmured. He was perplexed. Even after racking his brains, he was unable to understand what had happened. If the person before him had done something, he would sense it at the very least. However, he had sensed nothing at all. Jian Qin's movements paused momentarily as well. The effects of the will of the ultimate way of the sword roused his excitement. He was basically ravishing with joy, because he discovered that it had not taken a particularly large toll on him to nullify the God-tier battle skill. At most, it would just cost him some power of his soul. A cost like that was basically insignificant to him. Never had I thought, Never had I actually thought that God-tier battle skills are actually connected with the will of the world, and the connection would be so weak. A sharp sword condensed from my ultimate will can easily sever their connection. But I wonder whether it's only effective against the one type of God-tier battle skill used by Kuan-Tian, or against all God-tier battle skills. If it can overwhelm all God-tier battle skills in this similar fashion, I'll have no need to fear God-tier battle skills at all when my battle with the primordial realm experts of the Darkstar race erupts. However, the Darkstar world is different from the Saints' world. One's a complete, major world created, naturally, while the other's a smaller world formed from a planetary beast. My ultimate will can destroy God-tier battle skills in the Darkstar world, but that doesn't mean I can do the same in the Saints' world. However, it's more than enough even if it's only in the Darkstar world. Jian Chen thought quickly, already planning to find other primordial realm experts to test it on. Being effective against one God-tier battle skill did not mean it was effective against all God-tier battle skills. After all, there were various types of God-tier battle skills, so he still needed to experiment around. Have you been using tricks secretly? Kuan-Tian stared at Jian Chen in surprise as he asked in doubt. Fortunately, he did not have his complete memory, or his heart would probably be churning right now. This was because almost all cultivators knew that nothing like this could happen to God-tier battle skills after they had been launched. It was impossible for them to be roaring with power one moment, suppressing the surroundings with the might of the world, before losing all of their power in the next moment, becoming the most ordinary attack. Clearly, Kuan-Tian refused to believe it. Energy surged from his body as he used another God-tier battle skill, Darkstar Imperial Technique, Void Destruction. Jian Chen wanted to test whether his ultimate will was effective against other God-tier battle skills as well, so he was more than happy to see Kuan-Tian cast a second God-tier battle skill. As a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime, Kuan-Tian obviously used God-tier battle skills extremely quickly. He basically completed it instantly. Immediately, pressure flooded the surroundings and another God-tier battle skill condensed, crushing towards Jian Chen with enough power to destroy everything. The God-tier battle skill this time was even more powerful than the last. A huge pedestal appeared in the air, radiating with heavy pressure. Wherever it passed by, space would shatter and turn into chaos. Jian Chen's eyes shone extremely brightly. He had become restless a long time ago. With some eagerness and some urgency, he condensed an invisible sword once again and slashed with it. The pedestal condensed from the God-tier battle skill fell extremely quickly, but Jian Chen's ultimate will was even faster. Following that vague feeling, the invisible sword severed the connection between the God-tier battle skill and the world once more. Immediately, the God-tier battle skill that was radiating with pressure and destructive power deflated like a balloon. All of its might vanished, turning the startling God-tier battle skill into the most simple energy attack. Impossible, it's impossible. This time, Kuan-Tian became completely speechless. It was possible that his initial failure originated from making a mistake somewhere during the process, but he had clearly been much more diligent when casting it the second time. He had used everything he had, yet the result was no different. As a result, he was left utterly perplexed despite racking his brain. This was because he could tell that Jian Chen did nothing at all. His God-tier battle skill had just collapsed strangely. His God-tier battle skill was not the only thing that had collapsed. So had his confidence. After all, using a God-tier battle skill came at quite the cost. Casting God-tier battle skills twice and failing both times came with such a great cost that even a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime could not ignore. However, Jian Chen's face was filled with joy. He had actually succeeded with the second time. He had succeeded twice, consecutively, which convinced him of the reality that his ultimate will could suppress God-tier battle skills. He no longer wasted any more time after this. He immediately attacked Kuan-Tian. Without any God-tier battle skills, Kuan-Tian's threat to Jian Chen reduced once again. However, despite that, his battle prowess was still extremely great. Using his 2 God artifacts, he engaged in a battle of high intensity against Jian Chen in the land of soul destruction. Jian Chen was in no hurry to kill Kuan-Tian. Instead, he paid close attention to the way Kun Tian fought as well as the certain aspects he was skilled in. However, as the battle continued, he also discovered that his ultimate will was only effective against God-tier battle skills. It was useless against the secret techniques of the Darkstar race. Before long, Jian Chen and Kun Tian had already been fighting for 4 hours. They had crossed tens of thousand kilometers in the meantime. The entire land of soul destruction churned with their battle. The lingering slivers of consciousness from the planetary beast wreaked havoc in the surroundings, rushing into their heads from time to time and bombarding their souls. Suddenly, Jian Chen froze. A deafening roar exploded into his head, shaking up his soul like a candle flame in the wind. He had been attacked by the slivers of consciousness once again, and it was much more powerful than before. It caused his consciousness to blur for an instant. At the same time, he felt a sense of danger. Jian Chen immediately retreated without second thought. The laws of space pulsed around him, and he retreated to 100 meters away instantly like he had teleported. Basically, in the moment Jian Chen had vanished, a resplendent streak of light slashed over. It had basically brushed past his forehead. He had dodged it hazardously. Even though Jian Chen had dodged it successfully, the sharp sword chi struck his body, making him feel like he was being stabbed by needles. The mask on his face shattered under the sword chi, revealing his hidden face. Looking at the somewhat familiar yet also extremely unfamiliar face, Kun Tian showed doubt. However, he still cried out subconsciously, "Duff, it's actually you. Impossible, this is impossible. You're clearly just a second heavenly layer infinite prime. How did you become so powerful suddenly? Don't tell me you've been constantly hiding your strength these years?" Jian Chen's current appearance was not his own. Instead, it was the second heavenly layer infinite primes that he had seen in the Imperial City who left through the teleportation formation for Dark Knight City. The Duff in Kun Tian's eyes smiled strangely and said mysteriously, "Hall Master, there's no need for you to know so much." With that, the sword chi in Jian Chen's hand stabbed towards Kun Tian from afar. When he launched the attack, the sword chi along with part of his arm vanished, as if it had fused into the space there. Shadowless life-taking strike. Kun Tian suddenly shuddered, before immediately turning pale. His eyes widened, filled with disbelief, confusion, doubt, and so on. A spurt of blood erupted from his mouth with pieces of his organs. All he felt was an extremely powerful strand of sword chi tearing through the defenses of his divine armor somehow, appearing silently in his body and directly erupting in there, destroying most of his vitality and instantly heavily injuring him. That was not all. The sword chi that had suddenly appeared in his body actually flowed upwards after shredding his organs, directly rushing towards the soul in his head. Wherever the sword chi passed by, his body would be reduced to a bloody mess. No! In that moment, the battle-seasoned Kun Tian became frantic. He even showed fear because the sword chi was just too powerful and just too fast. He mobilized all the energy in his body to obstruct it, but the sword chi pierced through it all. Even when he wanted to do something else, the sword chi would be just too fast, so it was impossible for him to make it in time. Just as the sword chi was about to reach his soul, Kun Tian made up his mind with no other choice, immediately abandoning his body and emerging with his soul. He did not linger around afterwards, fleeing towards the entrance of the land of soul destruction as quickly as he could. Right now, he did not have any additional time to think. All of his reactions were based off his instincts. It was as if at a time like this, only a single path laid in front of him. This was the instinctive reaction embedded in the depths of his soul. "Look at how weak you've become after abandoning your body," Jian Chen sighed emotionally. Since Kun Tian had abandoned his body, only death would be waiting for him. Even if the Darkstar Emperor was here, he would not be able to save him. Let alone the Darkstar Emperor, even if Grand Primes were present, death awaited Kun Tian as long as his soul had not been protected by their power. "Destroy," Jian Chen said gently. He did not seem to do anything, but Kun Tian's soul that had already fled to several dozen kilometers away emitted a miserable shriek, before directly dispersing. Jian Chen's ultimate will envelop a region of 100,000 kilometers. In this range, he controlled the world, as if he was the absolute ruler there. With a single thought, he could determine the fates of countless god-kings. That was because god-kings could not oppose Jian Chen's will of the ultimate way of the sword. If Kuan Tian's body remained, Jian Chen could do nothing to him with his ultimate will. However, he was so puny as a soul. Any god-king could easily destroy his soul, so Jian Chen only needed to condense a strand of sword chi from the air with the power of his ultimate way of the sword to easily kill him. Even if you die, I'll make you die in confusion. Jian Chen touched his face. He had obviously purposefully assumed Duff's identity for killing Kuan Tian. He still did not have a complete understanding of the methods of the Dark Star race, so just in case, he had to take some precautions. Afterwards, Jian Chen arrived before Kuan Tian's corpse and removed his armor and sword without any hesitation at all. Kuan Tian's space ring obviously ended up on Jian Chen's finger as well. Jian Chen studied Kuan Tian's appearance and stature carefully. Afterwards, his appearance changed once again. In just a few seconds, he had assumed Kuan Tian's appearance. It was not just his appearance. Even his stature was exactly the same. He seemed identical to Kuan Tian when he was alive, without the slightest flaw. After destroying the corpse and the traces of battle, Jian Chen sat down on the spot to refine the armor and sword. He knew these two god artifacts were basically symbolic of Kuan Tian, so he needed to grasp them. Chapter 2742. Finally out, these two god artifacts probably were repaired. All god artifacts possessed artifact spirits, but as Jian Chen refined the two god artifacts, he failed to notice artifact spirits in any of them. And, after close examination, he discovered signs that the two god artifacts had been repaired. This immediately made him think of the divine hall that floated above the capital city of the Dark Star race in a ruined state. Doesn't the Dark Star race have any experts who can refine new god artifacts? Or should I say they lack the materials to? Jian Chen thought to himself, before soon laughing at himself. Why was he worrying about this? The Dark Star race did not have a single complete god artifact. That would only make things even better for him. He immediately dismissed his thoughts, focusing on refinement. Just as Jian Chen refined the god artifacts in the land of soul destruction, a large group flew quickly at a low altitude within the mist-shrouded two-world mountains in the direction of the distant Dark Night City. They emerged from the shrouded depths of the two-world mountains to the outskirts where mist was visibly thinner. Their group was huge, amounting to several tens of thousand people. All of them pulsed with energy, forming energy barriers around themselves to protect themselves. These energies all shone with different colors depending on their cultivation methods. Blending together, it seemed like rainbow light. These people were the group of prodigies led by Jin Hong who had entered the two-world mountains from the Saint's world. As they moved out of the enshrouded region, the group seemed to notice something. Everyone stopped involuntarily, studying the surrounding region. The mists thinned. The mists thinned. We're out, we're finally out. We've finally passed through the depths of the two-world mountains. We've arrived in the outskirts. We've succeeded. We've successfully crossed the two-world mountains. In the next moment, many of the prodigies could not help but cry out their hearts. All of them were excited and extremely moved. They all felt like they had survived a disaster. Because they all knew that as long as they left the depths of the two-world mountains, they would be truly safe. God King life-devouring beasts would never appear in the outskirts of the two-world mountains. At most, they would just come across a peak-over-god life-devouring beast or two. And peak-over-god life-devouring beasts posed no threat at all to this colossal group of several tens of thousand god kings. We're finally out. Jin Hong could not help but exhale deeply at the very back of the group. His heart that had always been on edge for the past few months finally relaxed. Around him were He Chanxian of the Heavenly Crane clan, Ping Yixing of the Empire Lotus Sword sect, Guang Wanhua of the Scarlet Light clan, Sun Ji of the Sun clan, Ying Wujin of the Darkness clan, and so on. All of them had eased up as well. Together with their delight, they felt like they had survived a disaster as well. We're just too powerful. We're just too impressive. We've actually made it through the two world mountains. I originally thought it was impossible for us to make it out alive, but we've actually succeeded. Haha, the two world mountains that can even make people pale has failed to stop us. We've completed an impossible mission. Once we return to our clans, our status will definitely rise with our achievements. This is the most impressive achievement in our lives. Even if we undergo tests in our clans, it'll increase our merit significantly. The prodigy of the Chu family, Chu Jie, Gong Rui's of the Gong family, Zhou Ji of the Yuqiong sect, Kong Fing of the Zhangqiong clan, and so on immediately sat down where they were and laughed out loud. Earlier, when they were still in the depths of the two world mountains, they were so nervous that they were even afraid of breathing too loudly. Their fear had reached the limit. Now that they had reached the outskirts, which were much safer, they were no longer afraid. They yelled out all of their emotions. However, what none of them knew about was that several dozen kilometers from them in the depths of the two world mountains, a colossal eagle perched on the crown of a large tree. It gazed at the group of people from afar with its rather intelligent eyes. The tree which the huge eagle perched on swayed and trembled about extremely unnaturally, as if it struggled to endure the eagle's weight. But at a closer glance, that did not seem to be the case either. Not a single person in Jin Hong's group knew just how much help the huge eagle had provided to them during their last part of the journey through the depths. After Jian Chen had left the two world mountains, the huge eagle remained in the shadows as a deterrent for the last part of their journey out of gratitude. It had scared away many God King life-devouring beasts. That was why the journey had been so peaceful towards the end. The huge eagle stood on the crown of the tree and observed them quietly for a while, and only afterwards did it unfurl its wings and take off, vanishing into the thick mist in the blink of an eye. With the departure of the eagle, the tree it was standing on behaved like its life had been spared. Its roots unearthed from the ground, before heaving up its huge trunk. As if it had grown countless legs, the tree scrambled off into the distance in a panic. All of the prodigies and the sacrificial soldiers sat on the ground in the outskirts of the two world mountains, absorbing divine crystals to recover their energy. During the recovery process, Jin Hong set up arrangements rapidly. He created small squadrons of the sacrificial soldiers, sending them off in different directions for investigation among the Dark Star race. As for the majority, they were in no hurry to leave after they recovered their peak condition. Instead, they remained in the depths of the two world mountains, only 100 kilometers from the outskirts, waiting patiently. The people of the Dark Star race have their abilities suppressed when they enter the two world mountains, preventing them from using their full strength. They won't enter the two world mountains so easily. Meanwhile, the two world mountains affect us much less compared to them, so we can't afford to leave here before we gain reliable information regarding the 100 Saint City, Jin Hong said to everyone. No one had any objections regarding this. They all understood remaining there would benefit them. Afterwards, everyone just sat down and began meditating, waiting silently in the two world mountains. He Qian sat nearby. However, she was clearly rather uneasy. She would constantly check on a divine hall in her hand, while her gaze would always fall in the direction of the depths. She was worried. He Qian, is the sliver of power of Yang Yutian's soul still in the divine hall? At this moment, Ping Yixing of the Empire Lotus Sword sect suddenly looked over and asked solemnly. Ping Yixing's question drew over many gazes. Immediately, many prodigies looked over, their gazes stopping on the shrunken divine hall in He Kanakian's hand. Many of them understood that if Yang Yutian had not stepped forward courageously, sacrificing himself to draw away the late God King life-devouring beast, probably many of them would die in the two world mountains. It would be impossible for all of them to be alive right now. The gazes of the prodigies who had fallen out with Jianchen, like Chu Jie, Gong Rui's, Kong Fing, Zhou Ji and Zhao Wenbin, all coldened slightly. Chapter 2743. Internal conflict. Chu Jie and the others all came from peak clans of the Saints' world. Even though they would not always be particularly important in the clan, such that some of them were not even direct descendants, they still possessed a natural sense of superiority. As a result, They just found an independent cultivator like Yang Yutian unpleasant to the eye. Yet in the end, the independent cultivator that they all looked down on had actually heavily injured them before so many people. This was obviously a huge insult to them, and with how arrogant they were and in their minds, this kind of humiliation had already transformed into utter hatred. This hatred had become on par to grievances of life and death. Now that they heard Yang Yutian's name again, killing intent was immediately set alight in the five of them. However, none of them said anything. They only gazed at He Qianqian, or more accurately, at the divine hall in He Qianqian's hands. He Qianqian frequently checked on the sliver of the power of Jian Chen's soul in the divine hall with the senses of her soul. She noticed their gazes and knew about their grievances with Jian Chen, so she immediately raised her guard. Only afterwards did she say to the people around her, "The sliver of power of Yang Yutian's soul is still intact in the divine hall. He's still alive." He Qianqian spoke very gently, but everyone could still hear the worry and anticipation in her voice. Of course, everyone understood that it was not because He Qianqian was particularly concerned for Yang Yutian. This was only due to the strength that he had demonstrated. He had already reached a level that He Qianqian could no longer afford to ignore. If he returned, it would mean that the group from the Heavenly Crane clan would become a powerful existence only second to Jin Hong. No one would be able to ignore this. The world of the fallen beast possessed many things that were in the interests of the clans behind them, so obviously the stronger their groups were, the more they could claim for their clans. Yang Yutian still alive? That's fantastic. Looks like he's much stronger than I imagined him to be. Not only has he successfully escaped from a late God King life-devouring beast, he's even managed to survive in the dangerous depths of the two-world mountains all alone until now. There's probably still a great battle to come within the Dark Star race. If we have an expert like Yang Yutian assisting us, the pressure we face will lessen. As soon as they heard Yang Yutian was still alive, Ping Yisheng of the Empire Lotus Sword Sect, Sun Ji of the Sun Family, Baijian Xiong of the 100 Battle Clan, and the other prodigies who had a good impression of Jian Chen all beamed with joy. They were extremely delighted by the news. As for Chu Jie's group, their expressions all became ugly. Afterwards, Kong Feng and Gong Rui's glanced at each other, and Kong Feng said nonchalantly, "He Qianqian, the Divine Hall's with you, so it's not like we can check on the situation in the Divine Hall. Whether Yang Yutian's still alive or not depends entirely on what you say. Why don't you give the Divine Hall to us so we can properly verify whether the sliver of the soul Yang Yutian left behind is actually still there or not?" Although he spoke with a peaceful tone, Kong Feng and Gong Rui's immediately took action before He Qianqian could even answer. The two of them charged forward, one of them going straight for He Qianqian, while the other targeting the Divine Hall in He Qianqian's hand. Gong Rui's grab the Divine Hall and immediately destroy the sliver of Yang Yutian's soul. Without it pinpointing our location, Yang Yutian will basically be blind in the depths of the two-world mountains. He'll never be able to leave there. All that will be waiting for him is death. In that moment he moved, Kong Feng said to Gong Rui's secretly, "Hee, don't worry. I know what to do. And it doesn't matter if I can't grab the Divine Hall either. As long as I can get close, I'll use my full strength to destroy the sliver of Yang Yutian's soul that he left there." Gong Rui sniggered. "What are you doing?" He Qianqian had constantly remained wary of them. As soon as Gong Rui's and Kong Feng moved, she reacted by immediately retreating. She was about to stow away the Divine Hall in her hands into her space ring as well. But at this moment, a speck of cold light suddenly appeared, arriving before He Qianqian in a single instant. From the corner of her eye, He Qianqian caught a glimpse of Chu Jie smirking strangely. Surprisingly, he held a black tube as thick as a finger in his hand, which surged with powerful ripples of energy. The speck of cold light had been launched by the finger-sized tube. At a closer glance, the speck of cold light was actually a needle condensed from concentrated energy. With lightning speed, the speck of cold light directly landed on the Divine Hall that He Qianqian had yet to stow away, immediately producing a violent explosion. The Divine Hall was blown out of He Qianqian's hand by the great force, flying off into the distance. "Chu Jie, I won't forget about this." He Qianxian cried out. She was extremely furious. Just when she wanted to grab the divine hall again, she became entangled with Kong Feng, who had just arrived. As for Gong Rui's, he moved like a bolt of lightning, directly charging towards the divine hall in the air. He pulsed with energy, about to pierce the divine hall with tremendous energy and disperse the sliver of the power of the soul that Yang Yutian left in there. Don't you dare! However, Jin Hong took action. With a flash, he arrived in front of Gong Rui's like he had teleported. He caught the flying divine hall with one hand easily as he directly threw a punch with the other towards Gong Rui's hand, which reached towards the divine hall. Bang! The fist and palm collided, producing a heavy sound. Gong Rui's expression changed drastically as he grunted and was launched away by Jin Hong's punch. He smashed through several trees along the way, before landing on the ground in a stagger. His face was bright red as he held down a mouthful of blood that had almost spurted out. Jin Hong, you've gotten in our way time and time again. Aren't you afraid of affecting our unity as a group? The divine hall fell into Jin Hong's hands and Kong Feng also stopped attacking He Qianxian. He growled angrily as he looked at Jin Hong with a sunken face. Although Jin Hong was the leader of this group and their seniors had all told them to follow Jin Hong, the seniors only implied to follow Jin Hong's orders for anything related to the Dark Star race. Their objective was for everyone to remain unified, so they could face the threat of the Dark Star race together. Right now, they were just targeting Jianshan alone to settle a personal grievance. Jin Hong had no right to interfere with this. They were not ignoring their seniors' advice either. If it weren't for Yang Yutian, who stepped forward and led the late God King life-devouring beast away, not all of you might have been able to make it out of the Two World Mountains. Just based on that, Yang Yutian has shown great kindness, whether it's to you or to us. Now you've made it out of the depths, you immediately want to destroy the marker for Yang Yutian's path out. Won't you even think about how you'll tarnish your clan's reputations by doing something so ungrateful? Jin Hong held the divine hall and stood proudly, with a rather indomitable bearing as he said righteously. Chapter 2744. News. Gong Rui's, who had been blown away by a punch from Jin Hong, stood up with some difficulty. He wiped away the sliver of blood from the corner of his mouth and roared furiously at Jin Hong. Jin Hong, stop spewing *T. Who said we wanted to destroy the sliver of power from Yang Yutian's soul? We just wanted to confirm whether Yang Yutian had died in the depths of the Two World Mountains. Instead, you've injured me all of a sudden. Do you really think that our Gong family is that easy to walk over? When he reached there, Gong Rui's entire presence suddenly changed. He suddenly looked behind him and yelled out, "Where are the sacrificial soldiers loyal to our Gong family?" With that, the presences of several hundred god kings immediately erupted from behind. The sacrificial soldiers of the Gong family all stood up, gathering behind Gong Rui's. These several hundred sacrificial soldiers were the source of Gong Rui's great confidence, because they had all grasped formations that the Gong family had passed down to them. A formation composed of several hundred sacrificial soldiers could rival a first heavenly layer infinite prime. Jin Hong, I've been sent into the world of the fallen beast by my clan, so I represent our Gong family. You've attacked me recklessly and even injured me. You've severely provoked the dignity of our Gong family. I can ignore what happened just then, but if you continue getting in my way, you can't blame me for ignoring the bigger picture, Gong Rui's said coldly. Now that he had emerged from the Two World Mountain, he was safe. He no longer believed he needed assistance from anyone else anymore, so his confidence obviously swelled up. Although Jin Hong's identity as the successor of a Grand Exalt brought him great respect, he had yet to grow to a point where the Gong family had to take him seriously. If Jin Hong did not purposefully get in his way, he obviously would have respected Jin Hong as well, but now that Jin Hong had already injured him, Gong Rui's would never remain silent in the face of humiliation anymore. Jin Hong did not become angered over Gong Rui's haughtiness. His expression did not change at all, but his aura did become even stronger. He said nonchalantly, "Ignore the bigger picture? Gong Rui's, I'm not going to threaten you. I just want to make it clear to you that if you really do forget the bigger picture and ruin everything for all of us for the sake of your personal matters, I, Jin Hong, will personally take your life without any hesitation. Jin Hong was direct and straightforward and spoke with firm resolve. He was imposing. With that, not only did Gong Ruai's expressions suddenly change, so did the expressions of over half of the prodigies present. Over the few months they spent together, everyone gained some understanding towards Jin Hong, so they knew Jin Hong's personality very well. They knew Jin Hong was not one to boast, and he would be serious with anything he said. There were basically no falsehoods in the words that came out of his mouth. Since he said he would kill Gong Ruai's, it meant that he really did have the resolve to do that. He was not just trying to frighten him. Ping Yixing of the Empire Lotus Sword sect said as well, Gong Ruai's, don't forget about your identity. If I remember correctly, the greatest figure that your branch in the clan depends on is a great elder, an 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime. Who knows how many descendants the great elder has who are countless generations from him, just like you. The funny part is that even the ancestor of your branch can't represent the Gong family, so what right do you have? Ping Yixing paused before continuing, let me just say something unpleasant. Even if I kill you right here and now, what can your ancestor do to me? Is he supposed to kill me in revenge? Gong Ruai's expression darkened. He stared at Ping Yixing coldly, but that was all he could do. He could not refute him. In terms of status, he was indeed lower than Ping Yixing, because the greatest figure in his branch was just a great elder, just as Ping Yixing had said. In the Gong family, great elders still had to follow the arrangements of their grand prime ancestor. As for Ping Yixing, he was a direct disciple of the current sect master of the Empire Lotus Sword sect. The sect master might not have been particularly powerful, but his master was the grand prime ancestor of the Empire Lotus Sword sect. The ancestor behind Gong Ruai's was an 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime great elder, while Ping Yixing's grandmaster was a grand prime. There was no point in comparing statuses. It's true that just Gong Ruai's alone can't scare you off, but what if you include us? With that, Kong Feng, Chu Jie, Zhou Ji and Zhou Wenbin all walked over, standing in a row with Gong Ruai's. Over half of the prodigies present watched on like it was all just a show. None of them were concerned with Gong Ruai's and the others' personal grievances with Yang Yutian, as well as Jin Hong's treatment of them. They would not interfere. As a result, the 5 of them formed a group. Coupled with the God King's sacrificial soldiers behind them, they formed a force to be reckoned with. Jin Hong remained unfazed. He glanced past Chu Jie, Gong Ruai's, Kong Feng, Zhou Wenbin and Zhou Ji. His gaze that had remained indifferent the entire time actually now shone with some coldness. He Qianqian, why don't you give the divine hull to me to hold on for now? I'd like to see who's bold enough to take things from me. After a moment of silence, Jin Hong suddenly said to He Qianqian. His voice became rather cold. He Qianqian obviously did not turn him down, agreeing to give the divine hull to him, because if the divine hull remained in her hands, she would be outnumbered and easily overpowered against the 5 of them if they insisted on taking it from her. And Jin Hong's tone made He Qianqian understand that he was angry. Jin Hong, who had remained at ease the entire time, had lost his temper for the first time. Oh no! Oh no! There's bad news! At this moment, a frantic voice rang out. One of the sacrificial soldiers who had been sent out to gather news had returned. As soon as he saw Jin Hong and the others, he immediately reported, "There's bad news. The 100 Saints City has been completely occupied by the Dark Star race. Everyone that our various clans has stationed in the 100 Saints City has been slain." The news was like a pack of explosives, shaking up everyone's hearts. All of the prodigies changed drastically in expression. Even though they already knew that something had probably happened to the 100 Saints City, they never imagined it to be so horrible. The 100 Saints City had actually been occupied by the Dark Star race, and the people stationed there by their clans were all slain? Was the Dark Star race planning on declaring war against them? That's impossible. We don't have any particular big grievances with the Dark Star race. Why would they do that? Many of the prodigies became dumbfounded, struggling to accept the reality. Even though they had mentally prepared themselves, They never thought the situation would be so severe. The sudden news disturbed everyone. At that moment, no one could care about Yang Yutian anymore. Only a single message resounded through their heads. The 100 Saints city had already become occupied by the Dark Star race. Chapter 2745. Advancing towards the 100 Saints city afterwards, the sacrificial soldiers sent out for investigations all returned one by one, bringing back more and more information. The 100 Saints city has already been sealed up, forbidding the entry of any outsiders. It's already been overrun by the Dark Star race now. A portion of the people stationed in the 100 Saints city by the various clans managed to escape. The experts of the Dark Star race are currently hunting them down. The other independent cultivators from outside haven't been specially targeted by the Dark Star race. This time, the Dark Star race has only tried to slaughter our clans. The teleportation formations leading to outside within the Dark Star race have all been closed down. They're forbidding anyone from leaving. All 36 cities of the Dark Star race have made announcements to hunt down the people who escaped from the 100 Saints city. The pieces of news arrived one by one. Every single one of them was like a colossal mountain, weighing on the hearts of the prodigies, almost to the point where they struggled to breathe. They originally thought it was just a small conflict, a small skirmish, that could be settled very quickly once they had arrived. However, they never thought the situation would be so severe. They had actually become enemies of the entire Dark Star race. There was no space at all for them to remain within the vast world of the Dark Star race. Zi Xiaoji. At this moment, a cry filled with surprise and shock rang out. A few God King's sacrificial soldiers arrived while carrying several dozen disheveled outsiders in tattered clothes. A prodigy among the crowd who had remained extremely discreet the entire time immediately shuddered and shot up from the ground, swiftly receiving the approaching group. Young Master Hao Ran. Young Master Hao Qin. In the next moment, the prodigy was overjoyed, rushing over emotionally, arriving in front of two pale-faced young men who were clearly injured in the end. Zi Xiaoji greets the two young masters. In the end, under the stunned gazes of the prodigies, he bowed deeply towards the two God Kings before him. Hao Ran, aren't they direct descendants of the Hao family? Uncertainty flashed through the eyes of many prodigies. Afterwards, their gazes towards Hao Ran and Hao Qin became cautious as well. The Hao family was a renowned, powerful clan across the entire Saints world. Even the tremendous clans behind these prodigies that they took pride in were afraid of offending the Hao family. Zi Xiaoji, you can spare the formalities. Has the clan received our request for reinforcements, which was why they sent you all here? Hao Ran helped up Zi Xiaoji. He glanced past the many figures in the mist emotionally. Zi Xiaoji nodded. Young masters, the outside world has already learned about what happened within the world of the fallen beast. The many clans have already banded together, basically using up all of their 100 Tribulations God King's pills to nurture large numbers of sacrificial soldiers, which they have sent into the world of the fallen beast. Good. That's just fantastic. The people trapped in the 100 Saints city finally can be saved. Hao Ran was deeply moved. He arrived before the prodigies with a quick stride and said sternly, "Everyone, some of you might know me, but the situation right now is extremely disastrous, so we don't have the time to catch up. There are still many of our people trapped in the 100 Saints city right now, and the 7th Hall Master has already ordered for their execution, so we can't waste any time at all. We need to save them immediately and take back the 100 Saints city which belongs to us." Brother Hao Ran, how are we supposed to oppose the entire Dark Star race with our power? Even if we take back the 100 Saints city, we won't be able to protect it from being taken again. After all, the Dark Star race has many primordial realm experts, Guan Wanhua of the Scarlet Light clan said in a troubled manner. Clearly, he was an old acquaintance of Hao Ran and Hao Qin. The situation's not as severe as you've all imagined it to be. We haven't become enemies with the entire Dark Star race yet. They only purposefully targeted us after the 7th Hall Master took control. As long as we take back the 100 Saints city, we'll be able to handle the 7th Hall Master. After all, it's not like we don't have arrangements of our own after all these years of operating among the Dark Star race, Hao Chen said sternly. Are you counting on the 2 Vice Hall Masters from the 9th and 10th Divine Halls? If they could be relied on, the 100 Saint City would have never been taken like this. He Qian said suddenly. Many of the prodigies had been provided with top-secret information for their trip into the world of the fallen beast this time, so it would make their operations among the Dark Star race easier. This included the members of the upper echelon within the Dark Star race that had been bribed by the 100 Saint City. Among the 9th and 10th Divine Halls, they each had a Vice Hall Master that secretly supported the 100 Saint City. Although the governing group of the Dark Star race changed with each millennium and the 9 other Divine Halls could not interfere during that period, a Vice Hall Master still possessed some weight within the Dark Star race. Even if they could not directly interfere with the process, what they said could influence the ruler's decision to a certain degree. We can't blame them either, because the 7th Divine Halls moved just too quickly. Coupled with our insufficient strength within the 100 Saint City, we lost the city very quickly, and we've lose our right to have a say in this matter without the 100 Saint City. But it's different now. With everyone's support, our strength has reached a point where we can no longer be ignored. Once we take back the 100 Saint City and unleash the might of the city, we'll be able to last a few months even against the attacks of the 7th Divine Hall. By then, the Vice Hall Masters of the 9th and 10th Divine Halls can help us out, and we'll have a chance at getting through this. Moreover, even if the plan fails, we can just rely on the teleportation formations in the 100 Saint City to leave the Dark Star world, as long as the city is in our possession, Hao Ran analyzed in detail. Everyone, you've just emerged from the 2 World Mountains, so you probably don't understand the current situation within the Dark Star race. The Dark Star race has sealed off all teleportation formations leading to the entrance of the Spirit's world now. The only way for us to leave is through the 100 Saint City. The 100 Saint City is our only path of retreat. Another God King stood forward from behind Hao Ran and Hao Chen. He came from another clan and had rendezvoused with the Hao family in the 2 World Mountains. If that's the case, let's set off immediately and take back the 100 Saint City. Jin Hong called out, immediately making his decision. No one objected to Jin Hong. None of the prodigies that had just crossed through the depths of the 2 World Mountains wanted to go back through there. The 100 Saint City was their only safe way out of here now, so they had to take it back. Afterwards, the large group organized itself. The representatives of the group of people hidden in Divine Halls had been called out by Jin Hong as well. Everyone formed several dozen groups, arranging themselves in various kinds of formations and quickly advancing towards the 100 Saint City whilst maintaining their orderly manner. In the world of soul destruction, Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes as he sat on the ground. He looked at the 2 god artifacts that radiated with a slight pressure as they hovered in front of him. He smiled in satisfaction. I've finally refined them. The sword doesn't suit me as well as the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, but my battle prowess will increase slightly yet again with it, Jian Chen murmured. With a thought, the 2 floating god artifacts turned into 2 streaks of light and vanished into his body. However, I need to wear the god artifact armor constantly. Although I can disguise myself as Kun Tian, it'll only be my appearance. I can't change what's inside me. Once I bleed, I'll be exposed. My blood's different from the blood of the Dark Star race, Jian Chen thought. The armor that he had just refined immediately appeared and enveloped his entire body, such that only his eyes remained exposed. Afterwards, he began to pace around in the land of soul destruction. Only after a final, careful check and confirmation that he had not left behind too many traces or any traces that might give him away did he make his way towards the entrance. When he approached the entrance, his energy suddenly surged. The power of the laws of the sword gathered on him, attacking the surroundings randomly. Immediately, deafening booms rang through the quiet land of soul destruction once more. As Jian Chen attacked the surroundings aimlessly, he flew towards the outskirts. When he left the land of soul destruction, his presence suddenly erupted, sweeping through the surroundings like a violent tidal wave. Even sharper and more powerful laws of the sword condensed, producing a great explosion around him, as if he was blowing up the sky. The sky rumbled as the earth tremored. Jian Qin displayed his strength fearlessly, creating a devastating disturbance that spread far and wide. In the end, after wreaking havoc to the surroundings with his sword qi, Jian Qin tottered and just collapsed on the ground, eyes shut and unconscious. At the same time, the seventh hall master just happened to be sitting on his throne with his eyes shut in the distant capital city. He seemed to be cultivating. Suddenly, he snapped open his eyes and his figure immediately vanished from the throne, appearing outside the divine hall. His deep eyes gazed in the direction of the land of soul destruction in surprise. Is that presence Kun Tian's? Uncertainty flashed through his eyes as his face rapidly sank. At the same time, figures also emerged silently from the other divine halls. They all looked in the direction of the land of soul destruction as their faces all changed. It's the Hall Master. It has to be the Hall Master. The Hall Master's broken through. From the fifth divine hall, the 3 vice hall masters emerged outside. Every single one of them were overjoyed, flying towards the land of soul destruction eagerly. Chapter 2746, Fraudulence, What a Powerful Ripple of Vitality. It's already surpassed the 5th heavenly layer, truly reaching the domain of the 6th heavenly layer. I never thought Kun Tian would actually end up breaking through after staying in the land of soul destruction for 3 years. A middle-aged man in white robes hovered in front of a divine hall with 4 primordial realm experts behind him. He was the 2nd hall master, Arna. He was also a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime. So what if he's broken through? He's remained in the land of soul destruction for 3 years. In the history of our Dark Star race, no one has managed to remain in there for so long, apart from our Emperor. We all know too well just how dangerous the land of soul destruction is to the soul. I just hope that Kun Tian won't suffer from any side effects because of this. Otherwise, even if he's broken through, he'll probably be stuck like this forever, without any room for improvement in the future, the 7th hall master said in a strange manner. He had always been on bad terms with the 5th hall master Kun Tian, so he obviously had nothing good to say about him. Behind the 7th hall master, Enlai and K-Soul emerged from the divine hall as well. They also looked in the direction of the land of soul destruction. After hearing what the 7th hall master had said, Enlai immediately sniggered, the 5th hall master's releasing his presence meaninglessly near the land of soul destruction. There's even a pulse of vitality among it all. In my opinion, there's nothing normal about this at all. Perhaps the hall master really might be right. While the 5th hall master has successfully reached the 6th heavenly layer, he must have paid a certain price. His soul might even be damaged. Vice hall master Enlai had basically spoken the 7th hall master's mind. The 7th hall master could not help but smile from the 5th hall master's suffering as he said in an unhurried manner, if his soul really is damaged, that'll be troublesome for him. Within our Dark Star world, heavenly resources that can influence the soul are rare in the first place, let alone precious items that can heal the soul. Kun Tian's erupted with his presence the moment he's left the land of soul destruction, even using his vitality. He makes it seem like he's locked in battle with someone. This is clearly far too abnormal. When he reached there, the 7th hall master's eyes gradually lit up. In the beginning, he was just venting slightly, but the more he spoke, the more reasonable it seemed, because Kun Tian's current behavior really did clash with his usual personality. Don't tell me I'm right? The 7th hall master thought. His eyes shone brighter and brighter, now containing a sliver of joy and eagerness. Enlai, K-Soul, let's go. Come with me to have a look. The 7th hall master immediately led his 2 vice hall masters to the land of soul destruction. After the 7th hall master left, the remaining hall masters all stood in front of their respective divine hall as their eyes flashed. Their emotions were slightly mixed. Don't tell me something's really happened to Kun Tian? The day of our great ceremony is approaching. Once it's complete, the will of the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirits will weaken once again, and we'll be able to reach chaotic prime that we've only been able to dream about. If Kun Tian really is injured in the land of soul destruction, It'll severely affect his future breakthroughs. He might even be overtaken by the people below him and lose his position as Hall Master, the second Hall Master Arna said in some worry. He was on relatively good terms with the fifth Hall Master, so he did not wish to see Kuan-Tian become like this. In the next moment, Arna moved, also shooting towards the land of soul destruction. He wanted to check on Kuan-Tian's situation personally. With Arna's departure, another 2 Hall Masters took off for the land of soul destruction. The 5 other Hall Masters remained outside for a while, before returning to their divine halls, no longer paying attention to this matter. Outside the land of soul destruction, the 3 Vice Hall Masters of the 5th Divine Hall traveled with lightning speed, arriving at the entrance very quickly. Behind them were the 2nd Hall Master Arna, the 7th Hall Master Getty, the 8th Hall Master Sin Ran and the 10th Hall Master Feng Shui. They had brought their Vice Hall Masters with them, all following behind the 3 Vice Hall Masters of the 5th Divine Hall at a steady pace. Clearly, they wanted to let the 3 Vice Hall Masters reach Kuan-Tian first. Something really has happened to Kuan-Tian. When he was still quite far away, the 7th Hall Master smiled slightly, because he had already discovered with the senses of his soul that Kuan-Tian had already fainted outside the land of soul destruction. He immediately took great delight in Kuan-Tian's fate. Hall Master! The 3 Vice Hall Masters all arrived before the unconscious Kuan-Tian. Their expressions all changed, filled with worry and unease. Anyone could tell that something had happened to Kuan-Tian with the state he was currently in. When they thought about the special characteristics of the land of soul destruction as well as the landscape that Kuan-Tian had destroyed, all of them confirmed their suspicions. That was although Kuan-Tian had successfully broken through, his soul was heavily affected as well. It might have even been damaged. The exact thing that the land of soul destruction harmed was the soul. If something really had happened to Kuan-Tian, the status of the 5th Divine Hall would plummet drastically. Without the support of their Hall Master, their 3 Vice Hall Masters would be 1 step lower than the 9 other Divine Halls. They would never be able to stand with their chests held high again. As a result, the 3 Vice Hall Masters worried about Kuan-Tian's situation the most. Let me check where Kuan-Tian is injured. The 8th Hall Master Sin Ran went up to Kuan-Tian and wanted to extend his hand to check up on him. Hold on. The 10th Hall Master Feng Shui appeared in front of Sin Ran. She was a woman who seemed to be in her 40s. Even though she seemed middle-aged, she still possessed her charm. Time had failed to leave behind too many traces on her face. Feng Shui stopped Sin Ran from checking Kuan-Tian. She said, "It's best that no one touches Kuan-Tian with the state he's in right now. It's extremely likely that he's harmed his soul. This is extremely difficult to deal with, so let's take him back to the Divine Hall first." Afterwards, the unconscious Kuan-Tian was taken back to the Divine Hall by one of his Vice Hall Masters. The 2nd Hall Master, 8th Hall Master and 10th Hall Master entered the 5th Divine Hall together. The 7th Hall Master did not follow them in. Instead, he returned to his 7th Divine Hall jubilantly. He had already confirmed that something had happened to Kuan-Tian, which made him overjoyed. In the 5th Divine Hall, a Vice Hall Master took out a jade bed and placed Kuan-Tian on there, before taking a step back, standing beside the 2 other Vice Hall Masters. All 3 of them frowned firmly. Clearly, they were extremely heavy-hearted and worried right now. To one side, the 2nd and 10th Hall Masters were stern as well. Clearly, they were on relatively good terms with Kuan-Tian. They were discussing how to treat Kuan-Tian. The Darkstar race did not have any methods to heal the soul, so the 3 Hall Masters all felt rather helpless with Kuan-Tian right now. They had no idea what to do, and they were afraid of acting recklessly as well. The 8th Hall Master Sin Ran remained composed. He scanned Kuan-Tian in deep curiosity. Afterwards, an extremely obscure power appeared from Sin Ran's feet, passing through the tough tiles of the Divine Hall, silently approaching the jade bed which Kuan-Tian laid on without even alerting the 2nd and the 10th Hall Masters. Very soon, it wormed its way into the jade bed, approaching Kuan-Tian gradually. Disguised as Kuan-Tian, Jianchen had actually been conscious the entire time. He had been observing the surroundings constantly, So he discovered the 8th Hall Master's attempt a long time ago, even though the 2 other Hall Masters had failed to notice anything. It's about time for me to wake up. Sensing the obscure, probing power from Sin Ran getting closer, Li Qingshan knew he could not continue like this. If Sin Ran really did see through his cover, all of his hard work would go to waste. Jian Chen's eyes trembled slightly as they gradually opened. The Hall Masters awake. The Hall Masters awake. The eyes of the 3 Vice Hall Masters had been glued to Jian Chen the entire time, so they immediately noticed any small movements Jian Chen made. The 2nd and 10th Hall Masters who were discussing how to treat Kun Tian stopped as well. They all looked over at Kun Tian. Sen Ran could only give up on his probing after Jian Chen woke up. He sighed inside in pity. He actually woke up now. What a pity, I was just a bit too late. Arg, my head hurts so much. As soon as he opened his eyes, Jian Chen's face twisted in agony. He immediately became extremely pale as he clutched his head with both hands, even rolling off the jade bed. He laid on the ground, banging his head against the jade bed and producing a series of heavy thumps. Hallmaster, what's wrong? It should be due to staying in the land of soul destruction for too long. His soul's been affected by the residual consciousness of the planetary beast. The 3 Vice Hall Masters all looked at one another. They watched Kun Tian behave in an abnormal manner blankly as they clearly seemed rather helpless. A while later, Kun Tian finally settled down. He seemed rather tired and weak. He looked at the people in complete confusion as he asked with no idea at all, "Who are you?" When the 2nd, 8th and 10th Hall Masters heard those 3 words, they immediately shuddered inside. At first, they were shocked before being followed up by disbelief. Kun Tian, why, you don't remember us? The 10th Hall Master stared at Kun Tian with widened eyes. He was in complete shock. Kun scratched his head and his confusion deepened. He murmured, Kun Tian? Who's Kun Tian? That's strange. Why does it sound so familiar, as if I've heard it somewhere before? Afterwards, he looked at the 3 Hall Masters again and said, You still haven't told me who you are. And where is this place? Why am I here? The 2nd Hall Master and 10th Hall Master looked at one another. They both fell silent. The 8th Hall Master gazed at Kun Tian deeply, before suddenly letting out a deep sigh. Looks like Kun Tian's lost his memory. He's successfully broken through to the 6th heavenly layer, but the breakthroughs come at quite the cost. Sen Ran no longer had a reason to remain, so with that, he turned around and left. Hall Master, don't you remember us? I'm Bing Yuan. Hall Master, I'm Taro. Think carefully. You should remember me. Hall Master, I'm Do Wujin. Have you forgotten? You once said that I'm the fiercest general under your command. The 3 Vice Hall Masters of the 5th Divine Hall all said together. They all struggled to believe this. Their Hall Master was a mighty 6th heavenly layer infinite prime. How had he lost his memory so easily? Bing Yuan, Do Wujin, Jian Chen murmured softly. He seemed to be in thought, as if he was doing his best to recall the past, but after quite a while, he still ended up shaking his head. He said in a despondent manner, I don't have any impression of these things at all. The only thing I can recall clearly is the land of soul destruction. I can't remember anything else. Chapter 2747, The Medicinal Garden, Thunten. Have you even forgotten about me? Think carefully. Recall as hard as you can, the 10th Hall Master Feng Shui said rather sorrowfully. She struggled to believe that Kun Tian had just lost his memories like this. This was because this was the Dark Star World. The Dark Star World was not a complete world. It was only a miniature world formed within a planetary beast. The variety of cultivation resources it could produce were nowhere as rich as the Saint's world. As a matter of fact, due to the environment, some special heavenly resources could not even be grown in the Dark Star World. The Dark Star World severely lacked heavenly resources that could influence the soul, because it was just impossible for them to produce heavenly resources like that. They could only rely on outsiders to bring them in. However, The grades of all the heavenly resources brought in from outside would have heavily restricted. As a primordial realm expert, regular heavenly resources were insufficient for Kuan Tian. Feng Shui was obviously extremely worried about how Kuan Tian would recover. Afterwards, the second Hall Master Arna, the 10th Hall Master Feng Shui and the 3 Vice Hall Masters under Kuan Tian tried various methods to repair Kuan Tian's memories, but the results only disappointed them. They discovered that Kuan Tian's memory had been wiped clean. Aside from remembering the land of soul destruction, he had truly forgotten everything else. He had even forgotten the things that he had held on to deeply in the past. The people in the hall all sighed at this sight. The 2nd and 10th Hall Masters originally wanted to properly congratulate Kuan Tian on his successful breakthrough, but they could only give up on that thought now. The 2nd and 10th Hall Masters did not stay for long. They left very soon. With their departure, only Bing Yuan, Taro and Dou Wujin remained in the large hall of the 5th Divine Hall. Disguised as Kuan Tian, Jianchen lowered his head and sank into his thoughts, while Bing Yuan, Taro and Dou Wujin stood there silently, because they had no idea what to say now that their hall master could not recall anything of the past. Were the 3 of you once my subordinates? Jianchen ended up being the one to break the silence. He did his best to act like he knew and understood nothing at all as he asked the 3 of them. Yes, Hall Master. Dou Wujin replied. Within the Dark Star race, the Vice Hall Masters all had to follow the Hall Master's command, so they were basically his subordinates. Hall Master? What's this Hall Master thing about? Tell me about myself from the past. I can't remember anything, Jianchen said in a vexed fashion. Bing Yuan, Taro and Dou Wujin looked at each other, before all chiming in, telling him about Kuan Tian's past. They spent a very long time, basically going through everything they knew regarding Kuan Tian, whether big or small. In particular, they would go into extremely great detail when they recalled matters that they believed to be extraordinarily significant to Kuan Tian. They tried to use these significant matters to stimulate their Hall Master's mind, so he could awaken his lost memories. However, their attempts would definitely be in vain. From them, Jianchen actually managed to obtain some useful information. A part of it included that apart from the 7th Divine Hall, the 4th Divine Hall had always been on bad terms with their 5th Divine Hall too. He also managed to deduce from some minor details that the 10th Hall Master Feng Shui was a little more than just friends with the 5th Hall Master Kuan Tian. Of course, Jianchen was not Kuan Tian, so he had no idea just what Kuan Tian and Feng Shui's relationship was, or what level it had reached. Aside from that, he had even learned about the existence of a treasured land within the Dark Star race that only primordial realm experts knew about. This treasured land was actually a place to plant heavenly resources, or as it was known in the outside world, a medicinal garden. The medicinal garden was treated by the entire upper echelon of the Dark Star race as their greatest piece of property. Even the Dark Star Emperor himself personally took part in the construction of the medicinal garden, using tremendous amounts of resources to cast down an extremely powerful protective formation in its distant outskirts. And what's this blood about? I feel like this isn't the blood that our race possesses. With a flip of his hand, he took out 15 droplets of essence blood from Kuan Tian's space ring. Jianchen could not help but let heavy killing intent and intense anger flow through him with the appearance of the essence blood. However, he hid it very well, so none of it appeared on the surface. Just a hall master like Kuan Tian possessed 15 droplets of essence blood. The Dark Star race had a total of 10 hall masters. It was obvious. The 9 other hall masters must have possessed Sacred Feather's essence blood as well. Sacred Feather never had much essence blood to begin with. Now that he had lost so much, Jianchen began to worry for Sacred Feather's safety. Besides, 12 out of the 15 droplets on Kuan Tian had been completely refined already. He could no longer sense any of Sacred Feather's presence within the essence blood anymore. Instead, the heavy presence of the Dark Star race lingered on it. It was as if the essence blood had already become part of the Dark Star world, having been imprinted by the Dark Star race. Hallmaster, these are the essence blood of a divine beast. The Emperor had personally taken action in the past, capturing a divine beast that had entered from outside. The emperor once stated that the power of the divine beast's bloodline is tremendous, which would be extremely beneficial to the ceremony of our race. The three vice hall masters told him everything they knew, answering all of Jianshen's questions in detail. When they felt that Jianshen was confused by any part, they would automatically explain it to him even before he could ask about it. This was because the three of them were deeply convinced he was Kun Tian, without any suspicions over his identity at all. They had not even considered doubting him to be an impostor. That was because the hall master right in front of them was a legitimate primordial realm expert with the strength he possessed. The various aspects of him all indicated he was Kun Tian who had just broken through to the 6th heavenly layer. Within the Dark Star race, primordial realm experts only totaled to several dozen. They were familiar with every single one of them, let alone the fact that the only people able to reach the 6th heavenly layer were hall masters. As a result, it was impossible for any imposters to appear. As for him being an outsider, they would have never considered that even in their wildest fantasies. Divine Beast. Upon hearing that, Jianshen immediately appeared to be interested, but he also made it seem like he knew nothing at all. Only after learning in detail what a divine beast was from the three vice hall masters did he finally ask, "Where has the divine beast been locked up? I suddenly want to see it." The three vice hall masters all smiled bitterly with that. Dou Wujin said, "Hallmaster, the divine beast's been imprisoned by the emperor personally, while the emperor's in secluded cultivation as well, so we probably won't be able to satisfy your request to see it. Moreover, you've actually seen the divine beast in the past already. There's not much to see at all. It's just a beast with a slightly stronger bloodline and pitiful strength, that's all. And the emperor's drained far too much essence blood from the divine beast, so it's on its last breath now. It's only alive due to some heavenly resources, so the divine beast can last until the day of the ceremony. The emperor probably won't let it out so easily." Jianshen was slightly relieved with that. His greatest worry was Sacred Feather would die before he could rescue him. But as it seemed now, there would be no threat to Sacred Feather's life at least until the day of the great ceremony, even though he had lost a lot of essence blood. As long as he was alive. As long as he was alive. No matter how severe his injuries were, he could recover from them. At this moment, Jianshen's expression changed, because he sensed a tablet suddenly shake violently in Kun Tian's space ring while shining brightly. At the same time, Bing Yuan, Taro and Dou Wujin's expressions changed as well. A similar tablet appeared in all of their hands, all shaking and shining as well. It's a warning from the formation. Something's happened near the medicinal garden. From the level of warning, it doesn't seem to be a small matter like usual either. The three vice hall masters all changed in expression. Dou Wujin immediately clasped his fist at Jianshen. "Hall master, something must have happened near the medicinal garden. We need to hurry over immediately." "Then let's go." Without any hesitation, Jianshen immediately left the 5th divine hall with the three vice hall masters. He had already heard about the medicinal garden from the three vice hall masters, the thing that the Dark Star race viewed as their most precious treasure. He just happened to want to check it out as well. When Jianshen emerged from the 5th divine hall, he could not help but glance at the other 9 divine halls. He discovered that it was not just their 5th divine hall, but the hall masters and vice hall masters of the 9th other divine halls had all emerged as well. They all made their way towards the teleportation formations set up on the square in front of their respective divine halls. All 10 divine halls had their own teleportation formation. Chapter 2748, Fruit of Nurturing Ways. When Jianshen looked at them, many of the hall masters and vice hall masters from the 9 other divine halls all looked at Jianshen as well. The 2nd hall master Arna and the 10th hall master Feng Shui had mixed expressions, while the 7th hall master Getty smiled mockingly, taking full delight in his misfortune. The other hall masters and vice hall masters were mostly indifferent. They were not affected by this much at all. Clearly, the 5th hall master Kun Tian's loss of memory was no longer a secret among the 10 divine halls of the Dark Star race. Basically everyone knew about it. All of their reactions were similar to the 3 Vice Hall Masters of the 5th Divine Hall. They did not doubt Kuan-Tian's identity at all. Instead, they found that this made perfect sense. They all knew about the horrors of the land of soul destruction. Kuan-Tian had remained there for 3 whole years, without setting a foot out. If his soul was fine, that would be strange instead. That was because even they were not bold enough to remain in there for so long. Their souls were unable to endure the constant attack of the planetary beast's slivers of consciousness over long periods of time. The only reason why they found that nothing was out of the ordinary was exactly because Kuan-Tian's soul was injured. Kuan-Tian, do you still remember the matters of the past? Do you remember who I am? Do you remember who these people are? As the 7th Hall Master Getty approached his teleportation formation, he did not forget to mock Kuan-Tian. He smiled from ear to ear. He was delighted. Behind Jian Qin, Bing Yuan, Taro and Dou Wujin's expressions all became ugly. They were all from the 5th Divine Hall, so now that their Hall Master had been mocked, they all felt humiliated as well. However, they felt utterly helpless against the 7th Hall Master due to the tremendous disparity in their identities and strength. Jian Qin looked over. 2 Vice Hall Masters followed the 7th Hall Master. They were a 3rd Heavenly Layer and a 4th Heavenly Layer Infinite Prime. Aside from them, there was also a 2nd Heavenly Layer Infinite Prime who had ventured to the Dark Night City. On the other hand, out of his 5th Divine Hall, Bing Yuan was the weakest, a 1st Heavenly Layer Infinite Prime. Following him was Taro, a 2nd Heavenly Layer Infinite Prime. Dou Wujin was the strongest at the 4th Heavenly Layer. In terms of strength, the 7th Divine Hall was indeed slightly stronger than the 5th Divine Hall. This Hall Master obviously knows you. You're the 7th Hall Master, Getty. However, I've heard that you've always worked against this Hall Master? Jian Qin glanced over without any intention of shying away as he sneered a little. He also spoke in a straightforward manner, without trying to bend his words. You can't say that. Why would I work against you? Getty laughed as he seemed to look down on Kuan-Tian. His face basically told them that Kuan-Tian had no right to oppose him. Though, you do seem quite a bit more confident after breaking through to the 6th Heavenly Layer, Kuan-Tian. As he laughed, Getty had already arrived in the teleportation formation with his 2 Vice Hall Masters. With a flash, they were gone. The Hall Masters and Vice Hall Masters from the 8 Divine Halls in the surroundings watched on indifferently. It was no longer anything strange to them for the 5th Divine Hall and 7th Divine Hall to have a little bit of conflict. In reality, it was not just the 5th Divine Hall and 7th Divine Hall that were on bad terms with one another out of the 10 Divine Halls. Some of the other Divine Halls were also on bad terms with one another. They would have their overt and covert struggles with each other too. However, these struggles would just be small skirmishes and small conflicts. They would only erupt on a small scale. It would never lead to battles to the death. Jian Qin had learnt about some of this from the 3 Vice Hall Masters. Jian Qin looked at where the 7th Hall Master Getty had vanished as he smiled mysteriously. He thought, in the recent 1,000 years, the Darkstar race is under the rule of Getty, and he's the sole reason behind the large-scale hunting of outsiders as well as the attack on the 100 Saint City. Looks like I need to make proper use of this identity as Kuan-Tian. Jian Qin thought rapidly. From time to time, slivers of light due to his calculations and predictions would flash through his eyes. It was extremely obscure, having been purposefully hidden by him, so no one could sense it. After all, with his current strength, it was still quite easy for him to hide things from infinite primes. As he thought, Jian Qin had already entered the teleportation formation with Bing Yuan, Taro and Dou Wujin. As it lit up, the 4 of them vanished. Through the teleportation formation, Jian Qin traveled far away from the capital city, arriving in an unknown land in the Darkstar world. As soon as he was transported here, Jian Qin sensed extremely dense origin energy. The origin energy did originate from the Darkstar world. It belonged entirely to the Saints' world. The Darkstar world and the Saints' world were 2 different worlds, so the energy they possessed were different as well. People of the Darkstar race were unable to absorb energy from divine crystals for cultivation, But cultivators of the saints' world could not absorb energy from this world either, completely relying on the divine crystals they brought with them to recover their strength. Now that he had entered an environment filled with origin energy, Jianchen even felt like he had returned to the saints' world. He looked around. There was no one around him from the 9 other divine halls. There were various flourishing plants as far as he could see. Every single one of them pulsed with rather powerful energy. They had already begun metamorphosize into heavenly resources. As a matter of fact, it was possible to say that these plants have already become heavenly resources, but they were just too young, so their grades were insufficient. Suddenly, powerful pulses of energy appeared from behind Jianchen. The 3 vice hall masters who had come with him all struck out, condensing their energy into blades and cutting up the heavenly resources in the surroundings. With the 3 primordial realm experts at work, all of the heavenly resources that Jianchen could see were cut up cleanly in just a while, turning the lush sea of greenery into empty plains. Jianchen turned around and looked at the 3 of them in uncertainty. The 3 vice hall masters knew their hall master had forgotten everything, so one of them immediately explained, "Hall master, the medicinal garden is just up ahead. Because this place is far too close to the medicinal garden, the plants here end up growing so quickly due to energy leaking out of the medicinal garden. However, as long as these plants exist, they will constantly drain away the energy of the medicinal garden, which is why we have to clean up the plants here from time to time to prevent energy from being wasted." Jianchen came to a realization. These plants, even the herbs that had already evolved to heavenly resources, were just weeds in the eyes of the Dark Star race. He could not help but expand the senses of his soul. Very soon, he discovered the 9 other hall masters in various other places, as well as the so-called medicinal garden of the Dark Star race. The medicinal garden was actually just a circular plot of land 100 kilometers across. The entire place was enveloped by a powerful formation as misty light churned around inside. The energy in there was extremely dense, so dense that it had already formed mist. As a matter of fact, some of it even condensed into droplets. From time to time, there would even be a light drizzle formed out of pure energy. The energy in the medicinal garden had already reached an extremely startling level. There were 10 teleportation formations constructed in the surroundings of the medicinal garden, which corresponded to the 10 divine halls. They had been surrounded by lush greenery as well, but now, they had all been reduced to flat land. Only a thick layer of tiny plant cuttings laid on the ground, pulsing with energy. There were formations underground which absorbed the energy of the plant cuttings and channeled it back into the medicinal garden. A fruit of nurturing ways? There's actually a fruit of nurturing ways in there? Suddenly, Jianchen's mind shuddered. He could clearly see a tiny tree that had not been obscured by the mist-like energy in the center of the medicinal garden with the senses of his soul. The tree was only as tall as a man, but there was a thumb-sized fruit at the very top. Jianchen had only read about fruit of nurturing ways from some ancient records in the saints' world. This was the first time he had seen it in person. This was because fruits of nurturing ways were extremely rare in the saints' world, so rare that they would be the stuff of legends even in the eyes of some primordial realm experts. It was extremely precious as well, so precious that even peak organizations with grand primes would fight over them. This was because the effects of the fruit of nurturing ways were just unbelievable. It did not nurture energy, but the ways of the world. It was said that once it was ingested, the ways of the world would be conjured before the person for them to comprehend. Jianchen had even learnt from the ancient records that people who ingested the fruit had an 80 to 90% of breaking through. What made it even more unbelievable was that not only was it effective on infinite primes and chaotic primes, it even had the same effect on grand primes. Once grand primes ingested the fruit, they would have an 80% chance at breaking through by a minor level of cultivation. The only issue was that the grade of fruit of nurturing ways that grand primes required was just too high. The fruit of nurturing ways is a god-tier heavenly resource. Heavenly resources are also split into 9 grades, which would also correspond to low grade, mid grade, high grade, and supreme grade. Low-grade fruit of nurturing ways were only effective on cultivators below the primordial realm, while mid-grade were effective on infinite primes, high-grade on chaotic primes, and supreme grade on grand primes. The fruit of nurturing ways right in front of me has already reached the peak of mid-grade. It's making its way into high-grade. No, it's already begun to evolve. Once it finishes evolving, it will be a high-grade fruit of nurturing ways. Jian Chen's chest heaved as he struggled to maintain his composure. Chapter 2749. The cost of raising the value of a high-grade fruit of nurturing ways was indescribable, because just one of them could produce a chaotic prime. Of course, that was given that the person who ingested it had reached the 9th heavenly layer of infinite prime. A high-grade fruit of nurturing ways had an 80% chance to turn a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime into a chaotic prime. Chaotic primes were already enough to become ancestors of many large clans in the Saints' world. They were ancient experts who ruled over a region. Of course, even if they were chaotic primes, a high grade of fruit of nurturing ways would still be effective on them. However, the increase in their cultivation would not be a major realm, but a minor realm. In the Saints' world, every minor level of cultivation after chaotic prime required tremendous hardships, requiring an accumulation of comprehension over an enormous period of time. To some people, it might have even been where they would stop at for the rest of their lives, unable to take another step forward unless they experienced some great fortuitous encounter. However, the various difficulties posed to them could be easily resolved with a high-grade fruit of nurturing ways, saving them countless years of difficult cultivation. That only demonstrated the value of a fruit of nurturing ways. Turns out the fruit of nurturing ways is evolving. It requires tremendous amounts of energy to evolve. The rapid depletion in energies what triggered the formation's warning. Dou Wujin gazed into the depths of the medicinal garden as he muttered to himself behind Jian Chen. The fruit of nurturing ways has been tended to by our entire race for so long. We've finally waited until it's evolving to the high grade. Since it's almost ripe, the great ceremony of our race should be brought forward as well. It's just a pity that we can't keep waiting until something as precious as that can grow until the supreme grade. If it reaches the supreme grade, the ways it nurtures will change qualitatively. Supreme grade? You better stop daydreaming. It basically took the entire race to raise the fruit of nurturing ways to high grade. With the ability of our race, it's nowhere near enough to raise it to supreme grade. We'll have to send it to the Saints' world and use the abundant resources of the Saints' world, and only then can we raise it to the supreme grade. The three Vice Hall Masters discussed behind Jian Chen. However, their gazes towards the fruit of nurturing ways were peaceful and utterly unfazed, nowhere as excited as Jian Chen was. This was because they all understood that the fruit of nurturing ways was an item that only the Dark Star Emperor could savor. No matter how precious it was, it had nothing to do with them. Since the fruit of nurturing ways is so previous, our race must have paid a tremendous price for it. Jian Chen stood with his arms crossed as he asked in a very casual manner. When they heard that, Bing Yuan, Taro and Dou Wujin all seemed to smile. One of them said, "Hall Master, before you lost your memory, you could not help but sigh whenever the fruit of nurturing ways was mentioned. You would say that the fruit of nurturing ways had appeared within our race as a blessing of our ancestors, sympathy from the great ways and protection from fate." Oh, did I? Looks like I've really forgotten everything. Jian Chen was rather surprised. He continued, "Tell me in detail." Taro said, "Hall Master, we did not get the fruit of nurturing ways from the outsiders through exchange. In reality, all of those clans in the outside world would have valued the fruit of nurturing ways like treasure. They would have never exchanged it with us. Now that I mention it, the way we obtained it was rather unimaginable. A weaker member of our clan killed an outsider overgod who broke the rules and found it in his space ring. However, at the very beginning, it was just a seed. The person did not recognize it was the seed of fruit of nurturing ways. He could only sense that it was extraordinary, so he offered it up to higher authorities. In the end, the seed of the fruit of nurturing ways was passed up through the system, before falling into our gaze. Afterwards, it was recognized by the emperor. Ever since then, our dark star race has basically devoted the entire race to raising this seed. The environment of our dark star race is not suited for the growth of the fruit of nurturing ways, so we obtained a tremendous quantity of precious, special soil of the saints' world from the outsiders through exchange. Our dark star race lacks the energy that the fruit of nurturing ways can absorb as it grows, so we obtained a large quantity of various divine crystals from the outsiders, using formations to draw out the energy from the divine crystals and replicate the environment of the saints' world in the medicinal garden. There are various heavenly resources from the saints' world planted in the medicinal garden now, such that some of them have even evolved to the god Tyr, but the medicinal garden was only created because of the fruit of nurturing ways. It's good that it's ripe. The fruit of nurturing ways basically gobbles up energy endlessly. In order to raise it, our dark star race would have to exchange with the outsiders for tremendous amounts of colored divine crystals yearly. If the colored divine crystals were converted to supreme grade divine crystals, then the fruit of nurturing ways would basically consume over 10 million of them every year. It's taken over 60 million years for the fruit of nurturing ways to grow to its current level from a seed. Even Jian Chen was amazed by that. He felt surprised by the amount of resources the dark star race had poured into it. The dark star race would use up over 10 million supreme-grade divine crystals every year in order to raise the fruit of nurturing ways, and the fruit had grown for over 60 million years now. That was an astronomical sum of wealth. This sum was even several times more than all of the wealth Jian Chen had accumulated from destroying the peak organizations on the cloud plane. In order to raise the fruit of nurturing ways, the dark star race really has done everything it can, regardless of the cost, Jian Chen thought. However, he also understood that due to the special environment they were in, it was extremely difficult for members of the dark star race to break through. As a result, the dark star race placed far more importance in the fruit of nurturing ways than people of the saints' world. Afterwards, Jian Chen inspected the medicinal garden furniture. He discovered that aside from the fruit of nurturing ways, there was a large number of other heavenly resources planted there. These heavenly resources were all native to the saints' world, and many of them had reached God Tyr as well. When they had been brought in here by cultivators of the saints' world, they were all at the Saint Tyr, because only grades below God Tyr could be brought into the dark star world. Afterwards, the dark star race planted and tended to them, which was why there were God Tyr heavenly resources now. Hall Master, the medicinal garden's been divided into 11 regions. The central region where the fruit of nurturing ways resides belongs to the Emperor alone, while the 10 regions around it are split among our 10 divine halls. We can freely plant various kinds of heavenly resources in our own regions. In other words, the heavenly resources in this region all belong to our 5th divine hall. Jian Chen swept past the region with the senses of his soul, before soon losing interest. The region that belonged to the 5th divine hall did have a few God Tyr heavenly resources. These heavenly resources were treasured by the dark star race, but they were nothing in Jian Chen's eyes. What really enticed him was the fruit of nurturing ways planted in the distant center. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.